Chapter 12:26. On the rock, Noah looked at the group of adventurers riding their horses at a speed faster than when they came, as if they were running for their lives. His expression did not change much from the beginning to the end. "Lord Noah," Demiurgos said softly. "Forgive me for being blunt, but why didn't Lord Noah kill all those inferior humans?" Most of the NPCs in Nazarik's underground tomb nodded in agreement. They had the same idea as Demiurgos. Because of Zacia's matter, Noah had the people of Nazarik's underground tomb completely seal off the surrounding area. Even though it was just a vast grassland, who knew how many monsters from Nazarik's underground tomb were hiding here? Just now, if Noah hadn't appeared and the human adventurers stepped into this area, the monsters hiding in the dark would have suddenly launched an attack and killed all the adventurers. No one doubted that any of the adventurers would be able to escape. After all, compared to the monsters in the underground tomb, the humans in this world were generally not very strong. Even Gujefu, who was known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, was only level 35. Among the humans, there wasn't even a single magician who could use 7th level spells. How could they fight against the monsters in the underground tomb? In Nazarik's underground tomb, even the monsters that could respawn and appear on their own were only around level 30. With the power of humans, they were no match for most of the magical creatures that could regenerate and appear on their own, not to mention the high-level magical creatures that required money to summon. The monster that had sealed off the area was precisely this type of high-level monster. Among them, the lowest level was level 60, and the highest was level 85. Moreover, there were more than 300 level 60 monsters. Although there weren't that many level 85 monsters, there were still 3 lying in ambush around Zatia. In this world, there was almost no one who could break through such a force. It would be very easy for them to kill the human adventurers who weren't even level 20. The NPCs in Nazarik's underground graveyard couldn't understand why Noah would show up and let these people go. In response, Noah did not hide anything and directly spoke his thoughts. "I already said that it's just a piece of advice. I'll only do it this once." After saying that, Noah looked at Igvaki, who had turned into cold steel, and closed his eyes. "If they ignore my words and still want to come, then I won't be merciful." Noah really couldn't stand the indiscriminate killing of the innocent. That was why Noah had specially made a trip to give the adventurers a piece of advice. Now, he had given the advice. If the adventurers didn't intend to listen and still wanted to interfere, then Noah wouldn't be so idle as to put on airs in front of them. To this extent, he had already done his utmost benevolence. Everyone had to be responsible for their own choices. It was just like how Noah had chosen to let the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarik capture the people of the Celian theocracy alive. In the end, it caused Zatia to be mentally dominated and fall to the point where she had no choice but to fight with Zatia. Demiurgos. At that moment, Noah asked Demiurgos softly. "The defense network should be more or less built, right?" "Yes." Demiurgos lowered his head and bowed slightly. "Whether it's the defensive wall to block intelligence magic or teleportation magic, it has been built. The magic traps and magic tools have also been set up. In addition, the monsters in the underground tomb of Nasarik have sealed the surrounding area. Considering the power of the creatures in this world, we can rest assured that we can act on Zatia's matter." "Is that so?" Noah continued to ask. "Then, have you investigated clearly? If you come into contact with Zatia, will it trigger the same mental domination power?" "This. We haven't investigated clearly yet." Demiurgos seemed to find it difficult to speak, as if blaming himself for not doing a good job. He lowered his head even more. "Although we haven't discovered anything yet, we can't rule out the possibility that if we come into contact with Zatia, the world-class tool that can control Zatia's mind won't be triggered and affect the people who come into contact with her." "Is that so?" Noah opened his eyes, looked in Zatia's direction, and murmured. "You still can't be sure. I'm really sorry." Demiurgos bowed deeply. "Lord Noah, please give me a little more time. 3 days will be enough. I'll definitely give the Supreme Lord a satisfactory answer." "No need," Noah said indifferently. "You don't have to interfere with Zatia's matter. Let me handle it. Wah. Demiurgos's expression changed. It wasn't just Demiurgos. Even the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric were shocked. Please wait. Yair Bade stepped forward and hurriedly said. That's too dangerous. That's right. Lord Noah. Yauda also hurriedly said. We haven't confirmed whether the same mental domination power will affect the people who come into contact with that idiot Satya, right? That's too dangerous, Malay said timidly. Lord Noah, why don't you reconsider? This subordinate also thinks that it's inappropriate, Seabass said seriously. If Lord Noah is also affected by mental domination, what should we do? There's no reason for the Supreme Lord to personally take the risk, Kasit said in a deep voice. Even if we want to suppress Satya, we should be the ones to do it. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric all voiced their objections. The objections made Noah smile bitterly. I'll tell you the truth, Noah looked at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric and said. Mental domination is ineffective against me, even if it's the power of a world item. The reason why they were so sure was because Noah had two special characteristics. The first was the curse resistance of the God Slayer. It was a foul physique that could repel all mysteries other than those that could affect gods. Unless he could control a god, the mind control used on Satya was ineffective on Noah. Even if the mind domination couldn't nullify the curse resistance of the God Slayer, Noah still had the three great constitutions. One of the three great constitutions allowed Noah to be immune to any negative effects. The effects on the mind were also in the same category. To be honest, I'm not afraid of the mind domination of a world item, nor am I afraid that the Syrian theocracy will come out of nowhere. I asked you to make so many arrangements because I'm worried that the Syrian theocracy might still be secretly controlling Zatiyah and have to be cut off. Another reason is that I don't want to be disturbed. Noah was silent for a while, then he finally said what was on his mind. In addition, I also need some time to reflect on myself for causing Zatiyah's mind domination. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to wait until now to deal with Zatiyah. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric fell silent. In fact, everyone present knew that Noah didn't make so many arrangements just for the reasons he said. There was another, most important reason, which was for his subordinates. The mind domination that could work on Zatiyah would definitely work on the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric. In order to prevent the others from falling into the same mind domination, Noah had to make so many arrangements to avoid being schemed against by the Syrian theocracy. As for Noah himself, he wasn't afraid of the mind domination or the Syrian theocracy's ambush. If it weren't for the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric, he could have just crushed them and dealt with Satiyah's matter. After all, even if Noah did not use the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon, he would still be able to reach the maximum level of 100. There was no need for him to worry so much. In other words, it was Nasaric who was holding Noah back. After understanding this, the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric were filled with dark emotions. Not only was he of no use, but he was also a hindrance to the person he was willing to give everything to. He was resentful of himself. Yair Bade couldn't help but say this because of this feeling. Lord Noah, please leave the matter of suppressing Zatiyah to us. No, leave it to me alone. If I show signs of mind domination, I'll kill myself. The eyes of the other NPCs lit up. It was obvious that Yair Bade's suggestion had tempted the others. As for death, it wasn't scary at all for these NPCs. What the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasaric were really afraid of was not being able to serve Noah and disappointing Noah. Understanding this, Noah couldn't say anything to reprimand him. However, that didn't mean that Noah would agree. Zatiyah was under mind domination because of my orders. Noah looked at everyone present. I want to deal with this matter personally. His unquestionable tone made the NPCs unable to refute. Only then did Noah turn his head and look in a certain direction. Zatiyah was there. Chapter 12:27. Whoosh. A cold breeze blew across the vast plain, causing the clouds in the sky to move with the wind and cover the sun. The ground that was originally illuminated by the sun began to be covered with a layer of shadow. Under such circumstances, the noble princess like Satya was still like a marionette. Her body was hanging down as if she was suspended by an invisible string, without any vitality. At a certain moment, a figure flew over like a meteor and landed on the ground not far from Satya. Looking up at Satya, who was hanging there like a marionette, Noah's emotions fluctuated slightly. The guilt he felt towards Satya had been suppressed deep in his heart. If this guilt were to appear before Satya was restored to her original state, it would not be beneficial for the upcoming battle. Therefore, Noah's current emotions were purely a lament for a beautiful thing turning into a lifeless object. It had to be said that in terms of appearance, although Satya looked very young and was far from being as mature as Beta, she had an unparalleled charm. Such a beautiful girl had now become a lifeless marionette. Anyone would feel that it was a pity. Noah's emotions were more intense than pure pity. After all, the other party was someone Noah knew. She was someone who was still alive and kicking. Of course, Noah understood. As long as he got close to her or launched an attack, that lifeless doll-like girl would instantly turn into a terrifying beast that surpassed any magical creature in this world. Speaking of which, Satya seems to have always wanted me to whip her. Noah bitterly smiled, and then the bitter smile on his face turned into his usual calmness. Although it's not what I want, Satya, I'll satisfy you today. The moment he said that, Noah's pitch-black eyes suddenly turned into a cold silver-white color. An invisible magic power fluctuated. Following the gaze of the pair of ice-cold silver eyes, it was projected onto Satya, whose upper body was hanging down like a marionette. Pa-ji. Pa-ji, Pa-ji, accompanied by the sound of ice freezing, Satya's petite body gradually turned into the color of steel and was covered by cold steel. Noah's cold refinement had the ability to change the strength of the effect depending on the enemy's strength and level. If it was a small character like Igvaki who had not even reached level 20, it would take less than 3 seconds to turn him into steel. However, as a level 100 existence, Satya could not compare to Igvaki at all. Therefore, when Noah's cold smelting took effect on Satya's body, even after 3 seconds, it could only temper Satya's ankles. In that instant, a dense evil aura, murderous aura, and bloody aura surged out from Satya's body as she hung there like a marionette. Then, Noah saw it. Satya, whose upper body was hanging down like a marionette without a trace of vitality, suddenly raised her head. Her pair of empty scarlet eyes quickly emitted a red light, and her coquettish little mouth cracked open as she suddenly burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. Amidst the pleasant laughter that sounded like silver bells, a pair of bat-like wings suddenly spread out from Satya's back and flapped abruptly. Boom! The charred ground where Satya was standing suddenly exploded. Just like that, the true ancestor of the vampires shot out like an arrow off the line. Riding the wind, she flapped her wings and shot toward Noah with an excited and ferocious smile on her beautiful face. In her hand, a ray of light suddenly bloomed and transformed into a strangely shaped spear that reminded one of the huge pipettes used in chemistry class. It was the only artifact that Satya possessed, the pipette. It was an artifact that could absorb damage to the opponent and use it to recover physical strength and injuries. Ha 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 ha. Amidst a burst of delightful laughter, Zaisha arrived in front of Noah. Under Noah's calm gaze, a bloodthirsty expression appeared on her pretty face as she fiercely stabbed the pike in her hand at Noah. Bang! It was just a simple stab, but a violent shockwave spread out with the pike in Zaisha's hand as the center, setting off a shocking sandstorm that enveloped Noah's entire body. Ahahaha. On the other hand, Zaisha seemed to have completely fallen into a frenzy. While letting out delightful laughter, she repeatedly thrusted the pike in her hand into the thick sand and wind that was stirred up by the shockwave. Immediately, a series of muffled explosive sounds reverberated within the dense sand and dust, causing the atmosphere to wail. The ground also trembled, rolling up a terrifying tornado-like air wave. That scene, in the eyes of the third party, was simply violent to the extreme. However, Zaisha did not show any signs of stopping. She continued to let out delightful laughter as she repeatedly stabbed the pike in her hand, setting off waves of sandstorm that swept in all directions. Lord Noah. In the great underground tomb of Nasarek, a group of NPCs who had returned to the stronghold and used intelligence magic to monitor the battle stood up from their seats one after another. Among them, Yair-Bel's delicate body even swayed due to her overly violent movements. She looked like she would faint at any moment. At this moment, a projection-like screen appeared in front of the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek. On the screen, Zaisha laughed maniacally as she repeatedly stabbed the pike in her hand, setting off waves of shocking sandstorm that caused the ground to tremble. The violent scene was presented before everyone's eyes. Sure enough, we shouldn't have let Lord Noah fight alone. Demiurgos no longer had his usual calmness. Instead, there was only endless anxiety on his face. We have to provide support as soon as possible. Wait, Demiurgos. Yair-Bel's pretty face also had a wavering expression, but she was not as anxious as Demiurgos. She stopped Demiurgos, who was about to leave. That lord won't be in trouble because of an attack of this level. Calm down. But Demiurgos still could not hide the anxiety on his face. Instead, it was Cositas who stared at the scene on the screen and suddenly spoke. Lord Noah isn't injured at all, right? Hearing this, everyone, including Yair-Bel and Demiurgos, looked at Cositas. Look carefully, said Cositas, with an accent that seemed to be superimposed on each other. Although Zaisha's attack frequency is very high, the pike's ability has not been used even once. After Cositas said this, the other NPCs also noticed this. If Zaisha had dealt actual damage to Noah, it was impossible that the pipette pike, that could absorb the damage dealt to the opponent and recover the wielder's stamina and injuries had not been activated. Even the NPCs in the distant Nasarek underground graveyard noticed this, so it was impossible for Zaisha not to have noticed it. Bang! In the midst of the explosion, Zaisha once again stabbed with her pike, causing the sandstorm and violent shockwaves to shake in all directions like an avalanche. This caused the ground to crack inch by inch, spreading cracks everywhere. However, Zaisha's maniacal laughter had already stopped, and the battle-thirsty smile on her face gradually disappeared. Her scarlet eyes stared at the thick sandstorm close at hand, and her grip on her pike tightened. After a long while, the sand and dust in the air began to settle down, allowing a figure to slowly emerge. Only then did Zaisha notice it. The tip of her pike was piercing a crimson gauntlet. Boost! A voice sounded from the crimson gauntlet. Chapter 12:28. Boost. When such a voice sounded from the crimson gauntlet, a warning sign rose in Satya's heart. At Satya's level, intuition, which was similar to a sixth sense, was more trustworthy than what she saw with her eyes. Therefore, the moment an inexplicable warning rose in her heart, Satya did not think twice and directly raised the pike in her hand to block in front of her. Hum. The next moment, a bright vortex of air emerged from the fist wrapped in the crimson gauntlet. At the same time, the arm covered by the crimson gauntlet suddenly clenched into a fist and punched heavily at Satya in front of her. Wherever the fist passed, a sonic boom sounded in the space. The momentum was extremely terrifying. Such a punch directly cut through the space and fiercely landed on the pike that Satya had raised in time to block in front of her. Boom! A loud muffled sound that caused people's eardrums to sting and their heads to go blank resounded in the sky above the plains. The astonishing impact turned into a substantial force that surged on the ground like a tide. At the center of the astonishing force, Satya only felt an extremely terrifying force feedback from the pike in her hand, causing her hand holding the pike to go numb. She was sent flying by the unparalleled force. Goo! Satya inevitably let out a soft groan. It took her a lot of effort to adjust her body in the air and land on the ground. Even so, the tremendous force acting on Satya's body still caused the vampire's feet to rub against the ground, plowing 2 gullies in the ground. When she came to a stop, the soles of her feet in the gullies emitted a sizzling sound, and light smoke rose from them. Satya's steel-like feet helped her instead, preventing her from feeling the pain caused by the violent friction. But even so, Satya still raised her head with a solemn expression and looked ahead. There, the thick sand and dust that filled the space had been blown away by the impact of the shocking punch just now. Then, Noah's figure appeared in front of Satya without any injuries, just like before. His expression was calm from beginning to end. However, in the hands of the calm Noah, there was a crimson gauntlet that could not be ignored no matter what. It was a gauntlet that looked like a ferocious dragon claw. There was also a jade inlaid on the back of the gauntlet. Boost! The voice came from the bayou. As the voice sounded, Satya was also keenly aware of it. The aura on Noah's body suddenly doubled in strength. There was no doubt that it was the power brought by the gauntlet. Upon understanding this, Satya wasn't alarmed. Instead, she laughed. Just like before, she let out a melodious laughter that sounded like silver bells. As expected of Sir Noah, the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasarek. Sure enough, an attack of that level couldn't do anything to you? Satya. Noah stared at the laughing Satya and narrowed his eyes slightly. I see. Although your mind is controlled, you haven't lost your rationality? What are you talking about? Sir Noah. Satya was like a noble princess. She held the spear in one hand and pressed the other to her chest as she spoke with her head raised and chest out. My condition is unprecedentedly good. It's so good that I can't help but want to suck all the blood from Sir Noah's body. After saying that, Satya stuck out her little pink tongue and licked her lips. She looked at Noah with a fervent gaze. If I can taste the blood of a supreme being, there's nothing more blissful than that. Is that so? Noah said indifferently. Then, if I say that I don't mind letting you have a taste, will you obediently listen to me and stand there without moving? Although it's a very charming proposal, that won't do. Satya revealed a bloodthirsty smile. Since Sir Noah attacked me, then no matter what, I have to do my best to kill you. Why? Noah asked in return. Why do you have to do your best to kill me when I attack you? Am I not the master you should be loyal to even if you have to give up your life? Why? The smile on Satya's face froze slightly, and she frowned as though she was confused by her own thoughts. That's right. Why would I fight Sir Noah? Shouldn't Sir Noah be the master I should be loyal to even if I have to give up my life? Why would I do something so disrespectful? After being confused for a while, Satya suddenly smiled. Although I don't know why, since it's already started, there's no reason not to continue, right? You're right, Noah said self-deprecatingly. Since it's already started, there's no reason not to continue. Ahahaha. Satya laughed joyfully. That's right. That's it. The instant she said that, a shocking bloody light suddenly erupted from Satya's body. Within the bloody light, Satya's figure slowly changed. No. It should be said that Satya's clothes slowly changed. The original red and black princess dress suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by a set of armor. It was a set of dark red full-body armor that seemed to be dyed in blood and gave off a bone-chilling feeling. The full-body armor tightly wrapped around Satya's body without any gaps. There was only a hole on her face, exposing her face to the air. It looked like a helmet. The helmet was like a swan's head, with bird-like feathers protruding from the left and right sides. There were also winged ornaments hanging from the chest to the shoulders. The lower half of the body was a bright red battle skirt. It wasn't just a piece of equipment, but a set of defensive equipment made up of many pieces of equipment. Moreover, every piece of that set of defensive equipment was at the legendary grade. When combined, they could display power close to the divine artifact level. Now that she was fully geared in legendary equipment, she looked like a bona fide Valkyrie. Her originally noble image had transformed into an extremely dignified one. Those who knew Satya would definitely understand. With this set of defensive equipment, the Guardian with the strongest one-on-one combat ability in Nazarek's underground tomb would truly display her strength. There was no other reason. the structure of Satya's professions was almost all about strengthening combat ability. Among these professions, there was a profession that specialized in combat ability, Valkyrie. Satya, who had entered a complete combat state, was now about to display the power of this profession. In that case, the preparations are complete. Opening her eyes, Satya held the pike tightly and grinned at Noah. Then, I'm going. With that, Satya stomped her feet on the ground, and her figure almost turned into a black line as she charged at Noah. Looking at the scene of Satya rushing at him with a bloodthirsty smile, Noah slowly clenched the red gauntlet covering his arm. The next moment, the pike that Satya had thrust out carried a fierce wind and an ear-piercing sound as it stabbed at Noah's head. Just like before, Satya had no intention of showing mercy at all. Thus, Noah clenched his fist tightly, allowing the vigorous power to condense on the gauntlet. Boost! The familiar voice sounded again. Noah's aura suddenly doubled. Immediately, Noah took a step forward. His ferocious gauntlets carried a vigorous force as they heavily smashed towards the long spear that was thrusting towards him. Clang! The collision between the spear and the gauntlet gave rise to a crisp sound of metal clashing. The sharp tip of the spear collided with the ferocious fist, causing an extremely violent ripple of energy to burst out from the point of collision between the sharp tip of the spear and the ferocious gauntlet. Kacha! Suddenly, a crack appeared on the ground beneath Noah and Satya's feet. Chapter 12:29. Without using the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon, Noah could match the level 100 Zaisha with his own strength alone. However, that was under the condition that Zaisha did not use any equipment. Now, Zaisha had equipped the Dropper Pike, a divine artifact, and was even wearing legendary equipment. Some of the equipment from Yggdrasil were magical equipment that could display unusual effects and functions, while others did not have such effects. Zaisha's Dropper Pike belonged to the former, while the crimson armor on her body belonged to the latter. However, the equipment from the game had a very common characteristic. That was, it could increase the attributes of the equipment user. In view of this, the strength of the fully armed Zaisha suddenly soared. Clang! Amidst the bell-like sound of metal colliding, the impact of the violent collision not only caused a crack to burst open on the ground, but it also forced both Noah and Zaisha back. However, Zaisha was forced back several steps. On the other hand, Noah only took half a step back before stabilizing his body. Although Zaisha's strength had soared after being fully armed, Noah's strength had also soared by several times under the effect of the boosted gear. In the end, Noah still had the upper hand. It's not over yet. Zaisha suddenly stepped forward while retreating, and her body once again shot out like a sharp arrow. She swung the huge pike in her hand, and with a burst of extremely oppressive wind, she repeatedly stabbed at Noah's body. His field of vision was covered by dazzling spear shadows. Noah's eyes hardened as he withdrew his feet. While he was still retreating in midair, his arm, which was covered by the ferocious crimson hand armor, was waved and violently deflected the many spear shadows that were thrusting towards him. Clang 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 clang. On the vast plain, the crisp sound of metal clashing echoed in the air, lingering for a long time. What's wrong with you? Lord Noah? Why aren't you fighting back? Ahahaha. Shadya, who was in a position where she was constantly attacking, repeatedly thrust the Dropper Pike in her hand in a violent manner while staring at Noah, who had a calm expression on his face as he deflected the incoming attacks one by one. She laughed provocatively. What about the overwhelming power you displayed when you faced all of us guardians alone in the throne room? Could it all be fake? Noah ignored Satya's provocation and only flicked away the spear that was thrusting at him. His expression didn't even change. Looking at the calm Noah, Satya became impatient. If that's the case, then let me kill you. After saying that, Zaisha suddenly stopped and extended her hand towards Noah. Wang! Amidst the trembling of space, 3 ring-shaped magic arrays suddenly overlapped and revolved in front of Satya's palm. Magic Enhancement Crimson Nova. A circle of crimson flames rose from the center of the magic array. The crimson flames began to expand like ripples. Then, in the space around Noah, who was retreating, the same flames suddenly appeared. It instantly enveloped Noah's entire body and exploded. Bang! Amidst the explosion, Noah's entire body was engulfed in raging flames, and he was roasted by the scorching flames. However, Xiaotaya's eyes suddenly widened. There was no other reason. It was because in the flames whose temperature was comparable to the magma of an erupting volcano, Noah seemed to be unaffected. His body carried traces of heat from the flames as he slowly raised his foot and stomped down. With a bang, Noah's figure shot out of the scorching flames and approached Xiaotaya in a breath. Xiaotaya's expression changed and her pupils shrank. She didn't have time to consider why her magic was ineffective against Noah. She hurriedly raised the pipette pike and fiercely swung it at the figure shooting over. Noah, who had turned into a lightning-like black shadow, seemed to have sensed the ferocious energy coming toward him. His body instantly moved horizontally, and with a spin, he appeared behind Xiaotaya as if he was performing an elegant dance. In the next second, Noah's body spun slightly, and he clenched his fists that were covered in crimson gloves. The powerful force caused a gust of wind to swirl around, and as Noah's fist swung out, it formed a sonic boom that blasted toward Zaisha's back. Sensing the terrifying energy coming from behind, Xiaotaya's expression changed again and again as she screamed. Impure Impact Shield. Blood-like crimson energy ripples suddenly spread out from Xiaotaya's body and turned into a barrier that protected Xiaotaya inside. Bang! With a muffled boom, Noah's terrifying punch smashed into the energy barrier. The resulting shockwave turned into waves of wind that spread out in all directions. Immediately after, a cracking sound rang out from the energy barrier. It was the sound of the energy barrier protecting Xiaotaya inside cracking. What? Xiaotaya was shocked. My impure impact shield actually cracked. On the other side, Noah's brows furrowed slightly. It didn't shatter. Muttering those words, Noah's figure once again spun around. Relying on his LV-4 and SSS rank, agility, and dexterity, he was like a phantom that constantly flashed around Shadia's body. While he was dodging, Noah's fists, which contained a terrifying strength chi, continuously blasted out, one after another, hitting the impure impact shield that protected Xiaotaya. Under Noah's almost non-stop attack, a series of muffled bang 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 sounds continuously shook the energy barrier around Xiaotaya without any interruption. Every time a muffled sound shook, the energy barrier around Xiaotaya would crack with a crack sound. Under such circumstances, Xiaotaya really didn't dare to believe it. If she was directly hit by such a punch, even if she was wearing legendary-grade equipment, she would definitely be injured. After all, Xiaotaya's impure impact shield was not a magic spell, but a special skill. This special skill could be used for both defense and attack. When used for defense, its defensive power was enough to surpass level 10 magic. When used for attack, its offensive power was enough to surpass Xiaotaya's pipette pike. Such a powerful special skill could only be used twice a day by Xiaotaya. Such a barrier actually cracked under Noah's punch. One could imagine how terrifying Noah's punch was. It must be the power of the Crimson Gauntlet. Otherwise, even Lord Noah wouldn't be able to crack the impure impact shield with an ordinary attack. Could it be a world-class item? Xiaotaya's guess was only half correct. Noah's ordinary punch could have such power because of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which increased his strength 3 times. With LV-4 and an SSS level blessing in all aspects, Noah's physical ability had been multiplied 3 times. One could imagine how terrifying it was. However, Noah's Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was not a world-class item, but a weapon imitated by weapon refinement. Boost. Suddenly, Noah's gauntlet made a sound again. The 4th multiplier ability was activated. Noah stomped on the ground and charged straight at Zaisha. His body spun, and he leaped into the air. Only then did Noah's aura suddenly soar by 2-fold. Immediately after, under Xiaotaya's narrowed pupils, the fist covered by the crimson gauntlet carried an incomparably fierce force, creating a sharp sonic boom as it smashed down on the energy barrier. Bang! A muffled sound that was louder than any of the previous sounds resounded in the sky. Chapter 12:30. Bang! Amidst the deafening explosion, a violent shockwave erupted from the cracked energy barrier around Satya. The shockwave swept away the dust on the ground, breaking it inch by inch. Bang! Without any suspense, Noah's punch, which had been amplified 4 times by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, caused the blood-like energy barrier to shatter like glass. It shattered into pieces and scattered in all directions. Then, Noah's body turned, and his legs suddenly flew out, landing heavily on Zaisha's body. Dong! The terrifying power sent Satya flying like a rubber ball. She rubbed against the air and heavily slammed into the ground in the distance. She smashed through the rock layer and stirred up a dense cloud of dust. The ground looked like it had been hit by a meteorite, and a crater appeared. Poochie! In the crater, Satya spat out a mouthful of blood. The crimson full-body armor on her body cracked open. Everyone suddenly fell silent. In front, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Satya, who was deep in the crater. He watched as blood seeped out of the corners of her mouth. His eyes flickered slightly as he sighed. Give up, Satya. You're no match for me. Although Noah's words did not contain much confidence, it was precisely because they did not contain any emotion that they gave off the most realistic feeling. Cough, cough, cough. Satya covered her chest and coughed as she slowly stood up from the crater with difficulty. She looked at Noah and revealed a coquettish smile. That's true. You're indeed worthy of being the supreme and invincible sovereign that I'm willing to sacrifice my life for. You're the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasarek. With such power, you're the absolute overlord of this world. Provoking you is more foolish than provoking a dragon. While saying that, Satya did not have any intention of giving up. Instead, the bloodthirst on her face became even stronger. Undoubtedly, I know this clearly. Why do I feel that I can't give up the battle with you? Why do I feel that I have to kill you? I really don't understand. Is that so? Noah closed his eyes. In other words, you don't intend to surrender? Of course. Satya pointed the pike in her hand at Noah and laughed coquettishly. I've been looking forward to Sir Noah being able to love me. I finally got this opportunity, so how can I give it up? Hearing that, Noah was silent for a while. After a while, he opened his eyes and looked at Satya with determination. If that's the case, then let me pull down the curtain of this boring battle. After saying that, Noah raised the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Boost, multiplication. The voice that represented the activation of the 5th, multiplication ability, echoed from the jade of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. The limit of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which was created by Noah's weapon refinement, was 5 boosts. Therefore, from the beginning of the battle until now, 50 seconds had passed, and the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was finally able to display its greatest power. The reason why Noah had not used the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon was because he was waiting for this moment. Thus, Noah chanted a contract in the Elven language. Cold Queen of Steel, the holy sword that slays demons, Noah pulled out the silver dagger from his back and placed it in his right hand equipped with the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. A dazzling white light burst out from the silver dagger. Amidst the light, the highest grade elven equipment named Demon Slayer appeared in its complete form. It turned into a shining silver holy sword and was held tightly by a ferocious red dragon-shaped gauntlet. That's... Zaisha's pupils shrank. Aster. Zaisha was not familiar with the elven girl named Aster, but she was not a stranger either. She was not familiar with Aster because ever since she flew out of Noah's bed in the form of a sword and fought with the Guardians, Zaisha had never seen Aster again. She was not unfamiliar because of jealousy. She was jealous that Aster could become Noah's weapon. Not only Zaisha, but even Yair was extremely jealous of Aster. For Yair and Zaisha, who had special feelings for Noah, just the title of becoming Noah's weapon was enough to arouse their jealousy. Not to mention, because Aster was a weapon, she was carried by Noah at all times. They even slept together, which made Yair and Zaisha jealous for a while. If they could be like Aster and transform into a weapon and be used by Lord Noah, it would be too fortunate. This was the truest thought of Yair and Zaisha after knowing of Aster's existence. Therefore, although Zaisha had only seen Aster once, she had never forgotten the existence of this elven girl. Of course, there was another reason why she had such a deep impression. That was, back then, Aster had fought with all the guardians in the form of a sword and was not at a disadvantage. At that time, all the guardians were not wearing any equipment, and because the battlefield was in Noah's room, they did not even use their true strength. However, being able to fight against 6 guardians was enough to prove Aster's strength. She was definitely not weaker than a world-class weapon. This fact made Zaisha extremely vigilant. Unfortunately, Noah had been holding back in not using the Demon Slayer, not only because he wanted to let it display the power of a world-class weapon. Transfer. Following this voice, the power of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which had been multiplied 5 times, was all transferred to the Demon Slayer. Immediately, the holy sword that had annihilated the Demon King trembled and released an astonishing light. That light illuminated the entire world. At this moment, the power of the strongest sword Elven had multiplied 5 times, increasing to an unprecedented level. With this level of power, even the mind control of a world-class item can be removed in an instant. As soon as his voice fell, Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer that was emitting an unprecedentedly strong light, leaned forward, shook, and turned into a black shadow that shot towards Zaisha. That speed was simply like a bolt of lightning. The terrifying speed shocked Zaisha again and again, and she could not hide her shock as she shouted. Impure Impact Shield. A blood-red energy barrier shook out from Zaisha's body and covered her. Absolute Sword Skill Initial Form Purple Lightning. The lightning-like thrust landed on the energy barrier. Bang! It couldn't even hold on for a second before the energy barrier suddenly exploded. Wah! Zaisha turned pale with fright. She hurriedly flapped the bat-like wings on her back and retreated. However, at this moment, golden ripples suddenly fluctuated in the space around Zaisha, and chains shot out. They stretched out and wrapped around Zaisha's limbs, forcibly restraining her body. This time, Zaisha did not even have time to react. Poochie. The white-eyed holy sword that was shining with an unprecedentedly strong and dazzling light pierced through Zaisha's chest. Rich white light enveloped Zaisha's body. Ah! Zaisha's sorrowful cry resounded through the sky. Chapter 1231. Ah! Shadia, who was clad in a crimson armor, was enveloped by the dazzling white radiance of the Demon Slayer. She wailed in agony as though she had been struck by lightning. She looked as though she had also been purified by the Demon Slayer. Wisps of black aura emanated from her body. Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer tightly, maintained the posture of piercing through Satya's chest with the elven device in his hand. He looked up at Satya, who was crying out in pain in the white light as though she had been struck by lightning. He gritted his teeth, and the divine power in his body intensified as he poured it into the silver holy sword in his hand. Clang! After the Demon Slayer was strengthened by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear 5 times in a row, in addition to the massive amount of divine power, the white radiance emanating from it was so dazzling that it burned one's eyes. Under this situation, Shadia, who was enveloped by the dazzling white radiance of the Demon Slayer, as though she had been struck by lightning, released wisps of black aura from her body, and her wails became even more intense. From a distance, it was as though a white sun had appeared on the vast plain, dazzling and resplendent. The dazzling white radiance gushed out like a tide and enveloped the entire space. At that moment, the monsters that were lying in ambush in the plain and sealed off Shadia's surroundings in accordance with Noah's orders were drowned by the dazzling white radiance. These demonic creatures also involuntarily appeared from the darkness and let out beast-like cries. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the demon slayer had a curse resistance that could break all curses. It was simply the natural enemy of these monsters who had negative energy that was completely opposite to their life force. Even Demon King Solomon, who had inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and was devoured by the power of the Dark Elf King, couldn't resist the power of the Demon Slayer, let alone these monsters. What's more, the power of the Demon Slayer had increased fivefold from the beginning to the end. Fortunately, at that moment, the power of the Demon Slayer wasn't directed at these monsters in the underground tomb of Nazareth. Otherwise, all the monsters here, including the few level 85 monsters, would have been cleansed by the power of the Demon Slayer, leaving nothing behind. As a result, amidst all kinds of bestial roars, the dazzling white radiance that enveloped the entire space finally stopped expanding. After an unknown amount of time, the white radiance that enveloped the entire vast plain gradually dimmed. Immediately, the monsters whose negative energy was surging due to the power of the Demon Slayer looked at the center of the dim white radiance with lingering fear. There, Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer, was still in the posture of piercing the silver holy sword into Satya's body. His head was lowered, and the bangs on his forehead covered his expression. On the other hand, Zaisha also lowered her head and returned to her marionette-like state. Hum. With a trembling sound, the huge thorny spear in Satya's hand and the crimson full-body armor on her body seemed to have turned into a mirage and disappeared in a flash. Bang! On Noah's right hand that was holding the Demon Slayer, the Longinus, which was called the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, also shattered into pieces like glass and disappeared with a shattering sound. Ugh, Satya let out a muffled groan. Her delicate body softened, and she slowly fell down. It was not until this moment that Noah finally made a move. After pulling the Demon Slayer out of Satya's body, Noah hugged Satya, who had collapsed on him, and knelt on one knee on the ground. Everyone suddenly fell silent. Ugh, after an unknown period of time, Satya let out a groan and slowly opened her scarlet eyes. Noah, who was holding Satya in his arms, immediately looked into her eyes. At this moment, there was no longer the emptiness in her eyes, nor was there the madness from before. There was only endless exhaustion. Ah! Satya also opened her eyes and met Noah's gaze. She was stunned on the spot. Sir! Noah, upon hearing the familiar voice, Noah secretly heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "What's the matter? How do you feel?" "How do I feel?" Satya seemed to be a little confused for a moment, and she seemed to be unable to grasp the situation. She just opened her tired eyes and spoke weakly. "I feel so tired. For an undying, this was absolutely an incredible thing. Because the undying didn't feel fatigue and didn't need to eat or drink. As the true ancestor of vampires, who was at the top of the undying, it was really inconceivable that Satya would feel tired. Of course, if it was mental fatigue, it would be a different story. However, looking at Satya's powerless appearance, it was clear that this vampire girl wasn't just mentally exhausted. She was definitely physically exhausted as well. However, this was not strange at all. As an undying, Satya's body was also full of negative energy, which was the opposite of life force. Under the direct attack of the Demon Slayer, the negative energy in Satya's body was purified to the extreme, which caused Satya to feel extremely tired like ordinary people. However, Satya's mental control was also lifted. Therefore, Satya looked at Noah blankly. "Why am I here? Why is Sir Noah here? You don't need to think about anything. Have a good rest first." Noah stroked Satya's silver-gray hair. "When you wake up, you'll understand everything." If it were in the past, as the guardian of Nazareth's underground tomb, Zaisha wouldn't have fallen asleep in front of the person she had given everything she had to serve. However, the accumulated fatigue in Satya's body seemed to be quite strong, so the vampire girl nodded weakly, closed her beautiful eyes, and slowly fell asleep. Looking at Satya, who had fallen asleep in his arms, Noah carried her in a princess carry. Let's go back, Satya. The noble little princess-like girl did not respond to Noah's words. She just laid in Noah's arms with a serene expression. In the underground tomb of Nasarek, a group of NPCs looked at the screen in the air and fell silent as they watched Noah carrying Satya in his arms. Demiurgo sighed and said so. Sir Noah's overwhelming victory. That's right. Yule was also in a daze. Even Satya, who is the strongest in one-on-one combat among the Guardians, was not a match for Sir Noah even when she was fully armed. 50 seconds. Cosita spat out white gas. Sir Noah defeated Satya in such a short amount of time. Really? Marley was a little depressed. Too strong, the group of NPCs fell silent. Then, Sebastian said, that's right. Does such a powerful supreme really need the loyalty of lowly people like us? This was the reason why the NPCs fell silent. I hope everyone will remember today's lesson. Yair Bade looked at Noah on the screen and said in an unprecedentedly serious tone. Next time, I won't allow you to be as useless as you were this time. The group of NPCs nodded resolutely. Chapter 1232. As mentioned earlier, the underground tomb of Nasarek was mainly divided into 10 floors, and all of them were located underground. On the ground, the underground tomb of Nasarek was an extremely vast graveyard. The graveyard was surrounded by a huge wall that was 6 meters thick. The wall was circular. There was an entrance at the front and back of the wall. Inside the wall, the huge graveyard seemed to have sunk into the earth, and it looked like a basin. In the graveyard, in addition to neatly trimmed weeds and many messy tombstones, there were also dense trees. The scene that seemed to form a forest complemented the surrounding neatly trimmed weeds and messy tombstones, creating a strong sense of contrast. Not only that, but there were also exquisite carvings of angels and goddesses everywhere in the graveyard. The carvings of angels and goddesses were extremely exquisite and breathtaking. Moreover, it could be seen at a glance that someone was carrying out regular maintenance. In contrast, the towering trees in the graveyard were crooked and drooped, brewing a gloomy atmosphere. Then, in the graveyard, there was an ancestral hall in each of the 4 corners of the graveyard. Surrounded by the 4 ancestral halls, there was an extremely large ancestral hall in the center of the graveyard. This large ancestral hall was the entrance to the underground tomb of Nasarek. Noah, who was carrying Satya, slowly descended from the air with the help of a magic tool with the power of flight, and landed in this strange graveyard. Whoosh! Almost immediately, monsters of different shapes and sizes flashed out from the shadows around the graveyard, their bodies surging with an evil aura. These monsters were at least level 50 and above. Therefore, once an outsider stepped into the graveyard, these monsters of at least level 50 and above would instantly appear and take down any outsider. However, when they saw the full appearance of the newcomer, the demonic creatures that were surging with evil aura all paused for a moment. Then, they knelt or prostrated themselves in unison, offering Noah their vassal. Noah ignored the monsters around him. He only carried the sleeping Satya and walked towards the central ancestral hall. When Noah walked out of sight, the monsters of at least level 50 and above seemed to have merged into the surrounding shadows and disappeared, continuing to guard the entrance to the underground tomb of Nasarek. Not long after, Noah, who was carrying Satya, stepped onto the steps of the ancestral hall. Lord Noah. At the entrance of the ancestral hall, Yacht, Mare, Cassette, Demiurgos, Sebastian, and a group of combat maids were all present. They bowed in the direction of Noah. Welcome back. Noah nodded casually and then looked at Yair Bade. Although judging from the situation, Satya should be fine, let me confirm it for the time being. Yes, Lord Noah, Yacht reported as he stepped forward and lowered his head. I have just confirmed the list of NPCs in the throne room's management system. Satya's name has indeed returned to its original white color. It is no longer red-black, which was hostile when she was in the state of mind. Based on this, Satya's problem should be resolved. That's good. Noah's expression softened slightly. That is true, but it is also true that Satya was hostile to the Supreme One. Yerbade looked at Noah, and his eyes, which were glowing with golden light, flickered slightly. Lord Noah, shouldn't we punish Satya? Noah furrowed his brows when he heard Yerbade's words. He raised his head and looked at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek. Only then did Noah notice that these NPCs who were loyal to him seemed to have changed. The change here wasn't in their appearance, but in their atmosphere. In the past, when these NPCs faced Noah, they would have an atmosphere of respect and worship. Now, not only did the reverence and worship become even more intense, there was also a trace of a different feeling mixed in. It was a feeling that came after they gained tenacious determination and strong willpower. It seemed that during the battle between Noah and Satya, these NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarek had gained some benefits. Please forgive me for interfering with Lord Noah's decision. Under Noah's gaze, Yach said so. For a force, the distinction between reward and punishment is the most important issue. It is also common sense in the world. Even if Satya was disrespectful to Lord Noah involuntarily, a mistake is a mistake. If there is no punishment, the subordinates won't take it as a warning. Who knows, when the same thing happens again, the others will use this as an excuse to weaken their willpower. The success rate of mind domination was also related to the strength of an individual's willpower. If one's willpower was strong, then even if they were under mind domination, they would be able to resist it. Take Satya for example. Even when her mind was under control, she could still rely on her tenacious willpower to resist and counterattack the caster. This resulted in the enemy being unable to give orders to Satya and could only make the helpless decision of abandoning her. Knowing that they will be punished for making such a mistake, even if they are under mind domination, in order to not be punished, everyone will resist so that the situation won't become too unfavorable, Demiurgos continued Yach's words. As such, this subordinate also believes that Lord Noah should give Satya an appropriate punishment as a warning. It's not just this incident, Seabass said in a deep voice. In the future, no matter what happens that will implicate the Supreme Sovereign, we hope that Lord Noah can give us the harshest punishment. Immediately, Yach, Mare, Cositas, and the other NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarek all nodded. Hearing this, Noah finally understood. Yach and the others suggested that Noah punish Satya not only because of the so-called fair rewards and punishments, but also because they wanted to express their determination. They were determined not to cause trouble for Noah and drag him down. Moreover, if I am under mind domination and betray Lord Noah, then even if Lord Noah forgives me, I won't forgive myself. Yach revealed a sincere and gentle smile. I'm sure Satya will feel the same way, right? If it is someone who is loyal to Lord Noah, then under such circumstances, there is no one who would not feel guilty, Demiurgos said. This subordinate believes that if Lord Noah punishes Satya, then the guilt in her heart will disappear. On the contrary, if Lord Noah doesn't punish Satya, then the guilt in her heart will definitely haunt her, right? This was indeed true. After all, punishment also meant forgiveness. No matter what mistakes one made, after being punished, it was as good as written off. In this place, even if it was for Satya's sake, Chen Zhao had to follow Yach and the other suggestions. Even though he knew this, Noah's frown deepened. The reason was simple. Noah was partly responsible for Satya's mind domination. Punish Satya? If that was the case, what would Noah do about the guilt in his heart? Noah, who felt a headache coming on, could only sigh and look at Yach. Let me think about it first. In any case, Satya hasn't woken up yet. When she wakes up, tell her to come find me. Understood. Yach and the others immediately lowered their heads. Seeing this, Noah walked past Yair Bedard and the others and walked into the large underground tomb in Nasarek. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek hurriedly followed. At this moment, Noah suddenly spoke. Demiurgos, think of a way to find out the location of the capital of the Celian cult. Yes. Demiurgos was startled at first, but he quickly responded after reacting. May I know what Lord Noah plans to do? Isn't that obvious? Noah continued to walk forward without looking back. As he walked, he spoke faintly. "You came to my territory to do as you please. Out of etiquette, I should also pay you a visit." Chapter 1233. On the day that the battle between Noah and Zaisha ended, a small change was also taking place in Elanter. Recalling the huge commotion that he had heard when he sneaked into Elanter, a person wearing a black robe whose figure seemed to have blended into the moonlight slightly lifted his face that was covered by the hood of the black robe. He opened his mouth and revealed a crazy and sinister smile. "Seems like that side is more interesting," these words rang out softly from under the hoodie. From the voice, it was easy to recognize that the other party was a woman. The woman in the black robe was immersed in her own world. No one knew what she thought of, but she kept laughing creepily as she walked forward. Upon closer inspection, the place where the black-robed person was actually a huge cemetery. This graveyard belonged to Elanter. Moreover, it was a huge cemetery with an outer city wall that occupied almost half of the western area of Elanter. Presumably, even compared to the other countries, the scale of this cemetery was very large, right? This was a scale that appeared to suppress the birth of the undead. The undead were a race that was born from death. Therefore, as long as there was a place where the living were dying, it was possible for the undead to be born. According to research, people had discovered that the probability of the dead who died an unnatural death or had no one to mourn was quite high. Therefore, in places like battlefields and ruins, the undead would often appear. Elanter's location bordered the borders of the kingdom, empire, and theocracy. Not to mention the theocracy for the time being, because the kingdom and empire were at war all year round, this city that bordered the borders of the two countries was extremely special. For example, the battlefield where the kingdom and empire fought was very close to Elanter. The soldiers who died on the battlefield, regardless of the number or cause of death, were enough to give birth to a large number of undead. In view of this, in order to prevent the dead from becoming undead, a cemetery that people could mourn became rather important. This was the reason why Elantili's cemetery was built so large. Of course, even if this was the case, undying beings would often be born here. It was one of the places that no one was willing to visit. Under such circumstances, the black-robed man walked unscrupulously in the cemetery. Soon, he arrived in front of an ancestral hall and removed the hood on his head. What appeared under the hood was the pretty face of a young girl in her prime. The girl's facial features were regular, and her appearance could be considered cute. However, on that cute face hung a dangerous smile like that of a carnivorous beast. With such a smile, the girl pushed open the stone door of the ancestral hall with light steps. She entered the ancestral hall and came to the stone pedestal where the corpse was placed. The young girl walked up to the stone pedestal and pressed down on a small, inconspicuous carving at the bottom of the stone pedestal with a relaxed movement that didn't make one think that she would appear in a graveyard or an ancestral hall. Kacha, the sculpture sank as the girl moved. Immediately afterward, the stone seat trembled and slowly opened like a door, revealing a flight of stairs leading to the underground in front of the young girl. Hee, the girl giggled as if she found it interesting. Moreover, she didn't hesitate to walk down the gloomy underground stairs that would make ordinary girls shrink back. She arrived at an extremely vast empty space. The walls and floor were made of artificially treated earth. It was unknown if there was wind, but the air was quite fresh. However, inside the empty space, there was a strange carpet hanging on the wall. Moreover, there was a candlestick that seemed to be dyed red with blood. The candles inside were lit and emitted a faint flame. The swaying candlelight made the girl's shadow stretch on the walls and floor. The girl walked with clear steps and arrived at the bottom of the empty space. Looking around, the girl's gaze stopped at a place after a while. Her giggling voice echoed in the surroundings without any concealment. Tisk, the girl's unpleasant giggling attracted a speechless sound that contained displeasure. That was the sound of someone being easily discovered. Moreover, it was the sound of someone being easily discovered by someone they hated. Under such a speechless sound, a thin man slowly walked out from the shadows where the girl was looking. It was a man with sunken eyes and no hair. It was impossible to determine his age. He wore a long robe and wore a necklace made of small animal skulls around his neck. His body was so thin that only skin and bones were left. He also held a black staff. Rather than calling him a human, it would be better to call him a skinny skeleton. "Hi." The girl warmly greeted the skeleton man. "I'm here to see you, little Kaji." "My name is Kadget, not little Kaji." The skeleton man who called himself Kadget said with an unpleasant voice. "Celian Theocracy Special Intelligence Unit, Dark Scriptures Clementine. What are you doing here?" "I'm no longer a member of the Dark Scripture." The girl named Clementine said with a frivolous tone. "I'm here to tell you a piece of good news, little Kaji. A piece of good news that will be of great help to your goal." Hearing this, Kadget narrowed his eyes. Kadget was a magic chanter that specialized in the study of the undead. That was why Kadget stayed in this kind of place. Of course, the reason why Kadget stayed here wasn't as simple as just researching the undying. He wanted to create an undying that wouldn't tire, didn't need to eat or drink, and had an immortal life. Usually, in places where the undead gathered, there would be powerful undead. If there were powerful undead gathered, then there would be even more powerful undead. Using this characteristic, in theory, as long as there were enough undead, then in the end, there would definitely be a terrifying undead king that was strong enough to make all the races in the world despair. Kadget's goal was to turn Ylantir into a ghost town. By collecting the negative energy in the ghost town, he could create a large number of undead, and even make himself an undead existence. The girl named Clementine clearly knew Kadget's goal. That was why she said that. "Did you know?" Clementine giggled. "It said that recently, the Adventurers Guild discovered a super powerful undying being and sent out 3 teams of secret silver-ranked adventurers as leaders. A total of more than 200 Adventurers Guild members went on a crusade against the undying being. In the end, those people ran back scared witless today, causing Ylantir to almost fall into chaos." Hearing this, Kadget's eyes flashed as he stared closely at Clementine. "Is what you said true?" "It's true, it's true. Of course it's true," Clementine said with a tone that made people feel like she was joking. "Also, it said that the super-powerful undead seems to be a servant that someone summoned with summoning magic." "Oh?" Kadget asked with interest. "Then what rank of undead summoning magic did that person use? 3rd rank? Or 4th rank?" "Little Kadget, you've become stupid." The smile on Clementine's face gradually became uninteresting as she said exaggeratedly. "That's a magic chanter that could force back more than 200 adventurers led by 3 teams of mithril rank adventurers. Just a servant alone made the Adventurers Guild feel like they're facing a great enemy. It even turned the leader of one of the mithril rank adventurers into a steel statue in an instant. How could it only be a 3rd or 4th rank trash?" The corners of Kadget's eyes twitched slightly. There was no other reason. The highest rank of undead summoning magic that Kadget used was only a 3rd rank magic. "Hey, little Kadget, don't you want to meet that person?" Clementine invited as if she had good intentions. "Perhaps you can obtain the secret to summoning such a powerful undead from him. It's very likely that he's like you, only able to use low-rank summoning magic, but can use precious magical tools to increase the power of his summoning magic. Perhaps that's how he can summon such a powerful undead." What she meant was for Kadget to snatch it from him. "Is that so?" Kadget rolled his eyes and sneered at Clementine. "But, what's in it for you? Do you even need to ask?" Clementine smiled cheerfully. "Of course it's interesting." Chapter 1234. If someone thought that the underground tomb of Nassarik was gloomy because it was underground, then they were completely wrong. Indeed, in the great catacombs beneath Nassarik, there were dark places. After all, the underground tomb of Nassarik was made up of 10 underground spaces. Among them, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors of the underground tomb of Nassarik were in the form of tombs. The 4th floor was an underground lake. The 5th floor was an ice river. The 6th floor was a jungle. The 7th floor was magma. The 8th floor was a wilderness. To say that the first 8 floors of the underground tomb of Nasarek were gloomy was to underestimate the stronghold of a powerful guild that could do anything in the game. However, this was only true for the first 8 floors of the underground tomb of Nasarek. The 9th floor of the Nasarek catacombs was as solemn and sacred as a chalk castle. Every room was a standard royal suite. It couldn't be any more luxurious. Compared to the first 8 floors, it was like a place of heaven. Naturally, such a place wouldn't be gloomy. The rainbow-colored crystal lamp hanging from the ceiling emitted light that was extremely gentle and beautiful. That was the light from a magic tool called perpetual light. Just like the name of the magic item, as long as there was enough magic, this light would never be extinguished. With such a magic item as a light source, even if the 9th floor of the underground tomb of Nasarek wanted to be gloomy, it wouldn't be gloomy. It was likely that anyone walking in the hallway would be moved by the beauty of this place. This was especially true for the people in the great underground tomb of Nasarek. There was no one who would not be moved when they walked on this floor that was originally occupied by the creators. Therefore, for the people in the underground tomb of Nasarek who were willing to give up everything to be loyal to the Supreme Sovereign, all the scenes and decorations here were worth loving. Every time they walked on this floor, everyone in the underground tomb of Nasarek would feel happy and reaffirm their loyalty to the creators. If someone didn't like the scenery here, then they weren't loyal enough to the Supreme Sovereign, or they had disloyal thoughts. That was the unanimous thought of everyone in the great tomb under Nasarek. Even Xiataya thought the same. However, this time, Zaisha did not feel happy at all. Instead, she felt unusually heavy. It wasn't just her mood. Even her footsteps were unbelievably heavy. Her beautiful face was filled with gloom. There was even a faint trace of despair on her face. What should I do? When Xiataya woke up from her dream and recalled everything that had happened, she almost fainted. This was because Xiataya remembered the person she was loyal to even if it cost her life. She swung her weapon. Why is it like this? Xiataya covered her face and was on the verge of crying. That must be a dream, right? After waking up from her sleep, Xiataya had told herself this more than once. There was no other way. Even Zatia herself did not want to believe that she had actually pointed her gun at the person she needed to be loyal to. That was tantamount to betrayal. No. In fact, that was betrayal. Even though Xiataya was under mental control at that time, it was just like what Yair Bade said. A mistake was a mistake, and a betrayal was a betrayal. Even if she had no choice, it was the truth. Xiataya could not forgive herself for that. It wasn't just because Noah was the person Satya had to pledge her loyalty to, it was also because Noah was the person Satya loved. Of course, there was something wrong with this love. In the game era, Xiataya's creator had set her up as a person with all kinds of inexplicable hobbies. Bisexual. Sadist. Masochist. Necrophilia. All kinds of special fetishes that ordinary people wouldn't dare to compliment were gathered in Xiataya's body. When they first met, Noah used overwhelming strength to send all the guardians flying. When he used this as a test, it accidentally aroused the masochistic part of the vampire girl's heart. Since then, Xiataya had fallen madly in love with Noah. In this way, who could say that this kind of love was right? But there was no doubt that Xiataya did have special feelings for Noah. Waving her gun at the person she needed to be loyal to even if she had to die. Becoming an enemy of the person she loved the most. Under the double blow, the guilt in Xiataya's heart was even stronger than Yair Bade and Demiurgos had imagined. Boo-hoo. Xiataya covered her face, and her voice sounded like she was about to cry. How good would it be if I could atone for my sins with death? For the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarek, death was definitely the easiest way to atone for their sins. This was because they had long decided to dedicate their lives to the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasarek. If possible, Xiataya really wanted to commit suicide now and end everything. However, Noah had ordered Xiataya to see him immediately after she woke up. Between death and orders, Xiaotaya chose the latter without hesitation. It was not that Xiaotaya was afraid of death. Instead, compared to death, Noah's orders were truly important. If she died under Noah's orders, she would be disobeying Noah's orders. Xiaotaya had already betrayed Noah once, so how could she disobey Noah's orders again? Therefore, no matter how heavy her footsteps were, Xiaotaya could only choose to continue. In fact, to Xiaotaya, it didn't matter if she was reprimanded by Noah. Taking her life or committing suicide to atone for her sins wasn't a problem at all. What Xiaotaya was truly afraid of was seeing Noah's disappointed expression. What should she do if she was abandoned by the supreme ruler she had to be loyal to, even if she had to give up her life? How terrifying would it be if she disappointed her master? If Noah no longer trusted Xiaotaya because of this, it would definitely be countless times more painful than death for her. If that happens, I won't be forgiven even if I lose my life, Xiaotaya couldn't help but mutter under her depression. If Lord Noah is disappointed in Nasarek because of this and leaves this place, before she could finish her sentence, Xiaotaya's delicate body trembled violently as if she couldn't imagine such an outcome. She shook her head desperately. No. That can't be. That can't happen. Lord Noah is the most benevolent supreme ruler in this world. A benevolent king who can even save inferior creatures like humans. He definitely won't abandon us. It was as if Xiaotaya had deliberately said these words to convince herself. However, this sentence made the uneasiness in Xiaotaya's heart even more intense, making her footsteps even heavier. She walked forward with an ashen expression. As time passed, no matter how heavy Xiaotaya's footsteps were, she still arrived at the door of Noah's room. To Xiaotaya's surprise, there were two figures in front of the door. Yair and Demiurgos. As if noticing Xiaotaya's arrival, Yair and Demiurgos focused their gazes on her at the same time. At that moment, Xiaotaya didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Yair and Demiurgos' gazes were full of blame. This made Xiaotaya, who was already very uneasy, panic. You. Why are you here? Yair and Demiurgos fell silent at the same time. Then, Demiurgos spoke up. We came to report to Lord Noah because the results of the research on the maintenance costs of the underground tomb in Nasarek have come out. The maintenance costs of the underground tomb in Nasarek used to be the gold coins in Yggdrasil. Now, there was no longer a channel to obtain the gold coins in Yggdrasil. The underground tomb in Nasarek had to confirm whether the money in this world could be used for maintenance costs. This result was enough to affect the future development of the underground tomb in Nasarek. Compared to Yair and Demiurgos, who were running around for this important matter, Xiaotaya, who had been controlled by the enemy and brought trouble to Noah, was simply too incompetent. Xiaotaya lowered her head guiltily. At that moment, Yair spoke. Since you're here, let's go in together. Xiaotaya could only nod. Chapter 1235. Kacha, with the sound of the door opening, Yair Demiurgos, and the restless Satya entered Noah's room together. The luxurious suite was presented in front of the three guardians of Nazarek's underground tomb, causing a trace of solemnity to rise in the hearts of the three guardians. Coming to the residence of the supreme ruler of Nazarek's underground tomb, no NPC would not feel solemn. Even Xiaotaya, who was feeling extremely uneasy, was the same. Even Demiurgos subconsciously lowered his voice. It seems that Lord Noah is still resting for the time being. In the underground tomb of Nasarek, all the creatures were of the xenomorph type. These xenomorph creatures almost never tired, didn't need to eat, and didn't need to rest or sleep at all. Therefore, xenomorph creatures were very troublesome to deal with for humans. For example, if humans and the undead were to go to war, then the undead's advantage would be simply unimaginable. Can you imagine, when you are exhausted from fighting on the battlefield, the lowest level skeleton is still waving its sword vigorously from start to finish? Can you imagine, when you haven't slept for 3 days and 3 nights, when you're really sleepy, the lowest level skeleton is still charging? Can you imagine, when your body urgently needs to replenish its food and recover its physical strength, the scene of the lowest-level skeleton still relentlessly launching attacks? For humans, fatigue, sleep, and food were indispensable. However, the lowly undead didn't have such problems. Therefore, if humans and the undead were to go to war, the undead army could continuously fight a war of attrition. As long as they fought for 7 days and 7 nights without stopping, then no matter how large the human army was, it would be finished. Moreover, the human army needed food, but the undead army didn't. They could wait until the human army ran out of food, then the humans would be finished. In view of this, in the eyes of the undead, and even in the eyes of other races, humans who had no special abilities, were born with extremely low physical conditions, and had all kinds of needs were inferior creatures. Because the human race was too troublesome and too fragile, wasn't it? That's what everyone in the great tombs of Nasarek was thinking. Only Noah was an exception. To be more precise, in the eyes of everyone in the underground tomb of Nasarek, humans were reduced to inferior existences because of the need to rest. But when it came to Noah, they were instantly glorified. Ah. Ah ah ah. Yair Bade clenched his hands tightly in front of him as if his heart was aching. He's actually still resting now. This must be the result of Lord Noah working so hard for the matter of Nasarek, right? We, the benevolent and merciful supreme beings, have worked too hard. Demiurgos lowered his head guiltily. If we could be more useful and help share Lord Noah's burden, Lord Noah wouldn't have to work. Siataya didn't say anything, but her heart ached for Noah. The heavens took pity on him. Noah was just resting normally. If Noah were to know that the fact that he fell asleep on the bed was seen by the guardians as the result of working hard, he would definitely be embarrassed, right? Then, should we wake Lord Noah up? Satya asked softly. I feel that waking up an utmost exalted is a very rude and disrespectful thing to do. What do you all think? Satya is right. Yair Bade sighed. If possible, I also hope that Lord Noah can rest well. Unfortunately, Lord Noah has already instructed that once there is a result on the maintenance costs of the underground tomb of Nasarek, we must report it even if he's resting. Demiurgos looked at Satya. Moreover, Lord Noah ordered you to see him immediately after you wake up. If you continue to procrastinate after waking up, I think Lord Noah will be angry, right? Hearing this, Satya's shoulders drooped. Then what should we do? There's no other way. Yair Bade took a deep breath and said righteously. Although it's very disrespectful, let me wake up Lord Noah. As she said this, a blush suddenly appeared on Yair Bade's serious and charming face, and her expression also became undulating. I heard that among humans, servants have to do something called a morning kiss to wake up their master. Only then will their master be in a good mood. Sure enough, I can only do this important task. Yair Bade's words made Satya, who had been feeling uneasy, raise her eyebrows, and a disdainful smile appeared on her young but exceptionally beautiful face. Forget it. If Lord Noah is kissed by a big-mouthed gorilla like you, his mood will only deteriorate, right? In that case, wouldn't it be worse for you? Yair Bade's youthful expression stiffened at Satya's words. After a slight distortion, it turned into a disdainful smile. If Lord Noah knew that a vampire approached him while he was asleep, I'm afraid he would be frightened awake no matter how good his dream is, right? This time, it was Satya's pretty face that stiffened and became slightly distorted. The two girls, one big and one small, emitted an evil aura that represented anger, causing the air in the room to become somewhat gloomy and cold. Just as Demiurgos felt that he should stop them, a weak voice sounded. What are you doing? Satya and Yair Bade were startled at the same time. Together with Demiurgos, they looked toward the source of the voice. There, a neatly dressed Noah stood at the door of the bedroom, looking at Satya and Yair Bade with narrowed eyes. Don't release that evil aura in someone else's room. If I hadn't woken up, would have been frightened awake by you, right? Lord Noah. The three guardians hurriedly knelt down on one knee. I'm very sorry. Forget it, I'm not really blaming you. Noah yawned, still looking a little sleepy. What time is it now? Lord Noah. Demiyugos lowered his head and said. According to the time on the surface, it should be around 7:00 in the morning. Is that so? Noah patted his cheeks and forced himself to wake up. Then, let's talk inside. After that, Noah walked directly to the inner office, opened the door, and walked in. Yair Bade, Satya, and Demiyugos looked at each other, stood up, and walked into the office with Noah. In the luxurious office, as soon as Noah sat on the black leather chair, Yair Bade immediately stepped forward. Lord Noah, regarding the issue of the maintenance cost of the Nasaric underground tomb, we have already come to a conclusion. Is that so? Noah nodded and said. But, let's talk about this later. Yair Bade was slightly startled, then immediately understood what Noah meant. Under such circumstances, Noah turned his head and cast his gaze on Satya. Satya. Yes. Satya probably didn't expect to be called so suddenly. Her shoulders trembled violently, and her voice was abnormally loud. I'm here. At that moment, Satya's heart was filled with an extremely strong sense of uneasiness. Before discussing the important issue related to the future development of the Nasaric underground tomb, Noah chose to talk to Satya first. Does that mean that compared to the most important issue of the future development of the Nasaric underground tomb, Satya's betrayal is more serious? When she thought of this, Satya could not hide her uneasiness. However, the next moment, Noah said such a sentence. There shouldn't be any problems with your body, right? Such a sentence made Satya, who thought she would be reprimanded, stunned at first. Then, a look of guilt appeared on her face. Chapter 1236. There was no doubt that the cost of maintaining the underground tomb of Nasaric was unimaginably important to the entire underground tomb of Nasaric. Ever since the underground tomb of Nasaric had officially become operational, Yair Bade and Demiyugos had been experimenting with the idea of finding out if the other gold coins could be used in addition to Yggdrasil. If they could be used, it would have a huge impact on the underground tomb of Nasaric. For the sake of the cost of summoning the high-level non-automatic rebirth monsters in the underground tomb of Nasaric, as well as the cost of activating the magic used in the base, as well as the cost of resurrecting NPCs when they died, and so on, once it was confirmed that the other gold coins could be used, the underground tomb of Nasaric would be able to develop rapidly while ensuring that they would be able to get enough money. After all, just by investing a large amount of money to summon a batch of high-level monsters, they would be able to increase the power and strength of the underground tomb of Nasaric at an extremely high efficiency. Although they still had to consider the various expenses that the underground tomb of Nasaric would need in the future, it was still better than not developing at all. If they couldn't use gold coins other than Yggdrasil to maintain the underground tomb of Nasaric, their future development would be greatly limited. Hence, this question was definitely the most important of all the matters in the underground tomb of Nasaric. Before Noah listened to such an important matter, he first called out to Satya. What did that mean? It meant that Satya's matter was more worthy of Noah's attention than such an important question. Initially, Satya thought that Noah was going to question her about her betrayal. However, Noah first asked about Satya's physical condition. Didn't that mean that in Noah's heart, Satya's safety was more important than the development of the underground tomb of Nasaric? However, Satya thought that Noah was going to question her. For the benevolent and merciful Supreme Overlord, how disrespectful and impolite was this? Wasn't it simply gauging the stature of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain? Lord Noah. Satya, who was full of guilt, could no longer bear it. She knelt on one knee and cried out in grief. Undoubtedly, as a guardian, I have committed such a stupid and serious crime. Please give me the harshest punishment. There was even a trace of pain in Satya's voice. However, Yair Bade and Demiyugos could understand Satya's feelings very well. As long as it was an NPC in the underground tomb of Nasaric, they would be able to understand her feelings. Right? She had the purest of loyalty, but she had done something that she would never be willing to do. Even if she was controlled, it would be unforgivable to the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasaric. If it's possible, I hope that I can atone for my sins with death. No, please give me a punishment that even death cannot compare to. Satya's voice sounded like a sob. Otherwise, I really can't forgive myself. Satya's Yair and Demiyugos kept their mouths shut. Noah looked at Satya, who was holding back her tears with a guilty expression, and sighed deeply. Satya, regarding your mind control, I am also in the wrong as the one who gave you the order. It can be said that I am the one who indirectly caused you to be controlled, so I really don't want to punish you. Furthermore, you didn't have a choice. I know that the benevolent and merciful Lord Noah will definitely forgive my stupidity. Satya hurriedly said. However, that was my fault for not being able to complete the mission given to me by the Supreme Sovereign and being controlled by the enemy. Lord Noah is definitely not wrong. Yair and Demiyugos inwardly nodded. Although Satya had acted because of Noah's orders, not only did she not complete the mission, but she also ended up being controlled by the enemy. That was because Satya was incompetent. No matter how they thought about it, it should not be Noah's fault. That was what Yair and Demiyugos were thinking. Of course, Noah definitely did not have the same thoughts. However, looking at the sorrowful Satya, Noah was also struggling in his heart. It was just like what Yair and the others said. Even if Noah thought that he was also in the wrong, Satya would definitely put all the blame on herself. If this sense of guilt was not properly relieved, it would definitely become an irremovable thorn in Satya's heart, right? Sometimes, being too loyal was not always a good thing. Noah immediately stood up from the black leather chair. Under Satya's stunned expression, he directly walked in front of her and knelt down on one knee like her. Lord Noah. Yair and Demiyugos were shocked. Satya shuddered and almost fainted. Now, the supreme ruler of the Nasaric underground tomb, the person whom everyone here was willing to sacrifice everything to be loyal to, was actually kneeling in front of a subordinate. If it weren't for the fact that there were only a few people here, perhaps the entire Nasaric underground tomb would have panicked. In this regard, Noah didn't care at all. He maintained the same height as Satya, looked into her eyes, and said very seriously. Satya, you know that you definitely feel a strong sense of guilt for what happened this time, but I feel the same way about it. After saying this, Noah extended his hand and gently stroked the head of the trembling Satya, who was almost scared out of her wits, as he spoke in a gentle voice. Even if you say that it's not my fault, there is no doubt that if I hadn't underestimated the people from the Si Lien cult nation and thought that you could easily take them down with your strength, which was why I casually gave the order and didn't consider the consequences carefully, you definitely wouldn't have been controlled. So, just like you, my fault can't be covered up. Noah shook his head gently. I know that you definitely won't accept my words, but at least let me apologize to you. I'm sorry, Satya. Sir Noah. Satya stared at Noah absent-mindedly. If you must punish me, then for your sake, I can do as you wish. Noah met Satya's gaze. But you have to remember that you're not allowed to mention anything about using death as an apology in the future. You once swore to me that you would give everything you have to me. You also said that your lives were all mine. Then, you carried all of my belongings with you, but when you made a mistake, you used my belongings to apologize. That's not right, is it? Noah's gaze swept across Yair Demiyugos, and Zaisha as he spoke. So, all of you remember that your lives are mine. Without my permission, you're not allowed to lose them. Do you hear me? These words turned into a surge of heat that surged in the hearts of Yair Satya, and Demiyugos. Without any hesitation, Yair and Demiyugos knelt on one knee at the same time. Together with Satya, who had her head lowered, they let out a voice that seemed to burst out from the depths of their souls. Yes, sir. Noah smiled faintly and stood up. He bent down and lifted Satya's chin, a slightly malicious smile on his face. As for Satya, your punishment will be left for tonight. Night. Tonight? Satya was startled at first. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and widened her eyes in ecstasy. Could it be, what is it? Noah said as if he was tempting a child. Come to my room tonight and you'll understand. Yes. Satya's voice was louder than before, and everyone could sense the joy in it. However, at this moment, the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. Night. Room. Night. Room. Punishment. Punishment. Punishment in the room at night. Yerbeda lowered his head, and a smile appeared on his face as if he had broken it. That scene was enough to scare an ordinary person to death. Chapter 1237. After a while, Satya happily left Noah's office with a completely different mood from when she first arrived. Thus, only Noah, Yerbade, and Demiyugos were left in the entire office. However, the three of them were in completely different moods. Noah was as relaxed as if he had solved an important matter, and sat back down on the black leather chair. Yerbade was brimming with resentment. He looked at Noah like a resentful woman who had been left out of her room. His eyes were filled with resentment. Demiyugos, on the other hand, was still touched by Noah's words just now, and he cast a look of respect and longing at Noah. Noah, who had already expected Yerbed's obvious resentment, ignored it, and acted as if nothing had happened. He spoke to Yerbed and Demiyugos. Well, Satya's matter has been resolved. Tell me what you plan to report. Yes. Demiyugos lowered his head and replied. Then, he hurriedly nudged Yerbade and gave him a look. Yerbade pursed his lips and looked extremely unwilling, but he also knew that now was not the time to be jealous and envious. He could only stand up reluctantly. Sir Noah. Yerbade adjusted his mood, and his beautiful face regained its calmness. Like I said just now, we have already come to a conclusion about the cost of maintaining the big underground tomb in Nasarek. Is that so? Noah leaned forward a little and asked seriously. So, what's the result? The result is very gratifying. Yerbade shared the good news. Whether it's the gold coins in Yggdrasil, the gold coins from this world brought back from the surface, or even the gold coins given by Sir Noah, they can all be used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek. Hearing this, Noah's eyes suddenly lit up. This was indeed an extremely good piece of news. If the gold coins of this world could really be used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek, then there would be no need to deliberately save the gold coins in Yggdrasil and the treasure hall of Nazarek's underground tomb. They could develop without worry. In particular, the news that the gold coins given by Noah could also be used was even better. With a treasure house that could produce unlimited gold coins, there would be no need to worry about the cost of maintaining the big underground tomb in Nasarek in the future. At this moment, Demiyugos said. However, we found that the three different types of gold coins used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek have completely different degrees of consumption. Completely different degrees of consumption? Noah asked in confusion. What's going on? This is the final confirmation after many experiments, Yerbade replied. We found that the different types of gold coins used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek have different degrees of consumption. For example, if we use 3 different types of gold coins to summon the same type of monster, the degree of consumption is completely different. Demiyugos presented a prepared report. Sir Noah can take a look at the details. Noah did not hesitate and directly took the report from Demiyugos and began to read it. After a while, Noah understood what was going on. Simply put, the 3 types of gold coins used to do the same thing were completely different degrees of consumption. For example, if he used the gold coins in Yggdrasil to summon a level 70 monster, he would need to spend 100,000 gold coins. However, if he used the gold coins of this world to summon a monster of the same level, type, and race, he would need to spend 200,000 gold coins. If he used the gold coins that Noah took out from the gate of Babylon, he would only need to spend 10,000 gold coins to summon the same monster. Other than the summoning of the monster, the rest of the costs showed the same result. In other words, for the big underground tomb in Nasarek, the value of the gold coins that Noah took out from the gate of Babylon was 10 times greater than the value of the gold coins in Yggdrasil. The gold coins in Yggdrasil were twice as valuable as the gold coins in this world. Naturally, under such circumstances, the expenditure of the 3 types of gold coins for the same purpose would naturally be different. After this experiment, we are sure of one thing. Yair Bade smiled slightly. That is, the problem of the maintenance cost of the big underground tomb in Nasarek can be used as long as it is gold coins. And the amount of money consumed is completely dependent on the gold content, Demiurgos said. Among the 3 types of gold coins, the gold coins that Lord Noah gave us have the highest gold content, so the consumption time is also the least. The gold coins in Yggdrasil have the second highest gold content, which is only 1/10 of the value of the gold coins that Lord Noah gave us. As for the gold coins in this world, they have the least gold content. Compared to the gold coins in Yggdrasil, their value is only half, Yair Bade continued. Therefore, we are sure that the difference in cost is determined by the gold content. As long as it is gold coins, no matter where they come from, they can be used. So that's how it is. Noah came to a realization and smiled. In that case, we don't have to spend so much effort to earn money on the surface anymore, right? No, the money in this world still has its value. Demiurgos shook his head. According to the information we have, in this world, different human countries use different gold coins. It is generally difficult to use the gold coins of other countries in another country. Presumably, apart from the gold coins of this world, it will be slightly troublesome to use the 2 types of gold coins we have in this world. And when the people in the big underground tomb in Nasarek make items, they need to consume materials. These will need to be obtained from this world in the future. Yair Bade nodded. If we have the gold coins of this world, then we can buy a large amount of materials from this world to make all kinds of items. That's true. Noah also nodded. This can indeed avoid a lot of trouble. In addition, we also found a coin box in Nasarek, Demiurgos said with a smile. That is a tool used to exchange gold coins in Yggdrasil. As long as you put an item in, the coin box will be able to appraise the value of the item and exchange it for gold coins in Yggdrasil of the same value. What? Noah suddenly smiled helplessly. So there is a way to obtain gold coins in Yggdrasil? Then wouldn't my efforts be in vain? You can't say that, Yair Bade quickly said. After all, compared to gold coins, all kinds of items and magical tools are undoubtedly more useful. It would be a waste to put them in the coin box. Moreover, the value of the items appraised by the coin box will definitely be lower than the original value of the item. Even if you let someone with a merchant profession operate it, it will still be much lower than the original value. Demiurgos agreed. So, as for the coin exchange box, it's better not to use it unless it's absolutely necessary. Noah nodded in understanding. Regardless of the value, compared to gold coins, Noah naturally hoped to obtain magical tools with all kinds of wonderful uses. If he ran out of gold coins, he could think of other ways to obtain them. However, if he ran out of precious magical tools, it would definitely be much harder to obtain them than gold coins. Moreover, compared to carrying money with him, magical tools that could be used at critical times were undoubtedly much more precious. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Noah would not exchange his precious items for gold coins. Thus, Noah stood up. All of you, come with me to the library. Yair Bade and Demiurgos both nodded. Chapter 1238. On the 10th floor of the underground tomb of Nasarek, there was a huge library. It was a dark brown library. The atmosphere in the air was very calm, and there was a gentle magical light that illuminated every corner of the library. The high ceiling was circular. There was a huge door outside. The size of the door was comparable to the door of the throne room. On both sides of the door, there was a gorm that was more than 3 meters tall. The gorms had the appearance of a warrior, and their bodies flickered with a luster that normal stones or metals could not have. It was obvious that they were made from extremely rare materials. Although they were inanimate objects and their auras could not be sensed, the solemn atmosphere around the two Gorms told others that they were definitely much stronger than normal Gorms. With Noah in the lead, Yerbade and Dimiyugos on his left and right like bodyguards, the three of them arrived in front of the huge door guarded by the Gorms. If it was anyone else in the underground tomb of Nassarik, they would have knelt down upon seeing Noah. However, the Gorms did not have intelligence, nor were they living creatures. They were just weapons, so they naturally did not have such knowledge. Thus, Yerbade and Dimiyugos could not reprimand the two Gorms for being rude, and Yerbade spoke loudly. "Open the door." Reacting to Yerbade's words, the Gorms standing on both sides of the door suddenly moved. Like stone giants and robots, the two Gorms clumsily moved to the side and slowly pushed open the huge door. In the next moment, a space that was more like an art gallery than a library appeared in front of Noah's eyes. It was a space with all kinds of huge bookshelves. The walls, floor, and even the bookshelves were decorated with countless decorations. There was not even a speck of dust on the bright and clean floor, and beautiful patterns were drawn on it. There was also a huge wet mural on the ceiling. From here, one could see the second floor on both sides. After all, above the wall, there was a stand that protruded outwards. There were also rooms with entrances, and bookshelves were placed in the rooms. It looked like a heavenly kingdom of books. A few glass display cabinets with extremely precious books that were obviously different from ordinary books also entered Noah's eyes. A tranquil atmosphere filled the air. Noah, Yerbade, and Dimiyugos walked into the library together. The door behind them was slowly closed by the two Gorms. Right now, Noah, Yerbade, and Dimiyugos were in a place called the Realm of Reason. The huge library that existed in the 10th floor of the Great Tomb of Nassarik was divided into 3 sections: the space of knowledge, the space of reason, and the space of magic. Noah looked around and exclaimed as he walked along the aisles separated by bookshelves. "Is this the library on the 10th floor of the Nassarik catacombs?" In fact, Noah already knew about the existence of this library. That was because some of the books stored in this library were extremely precious to the Great Tomb of Nassarik. The books here could be divided into 5 types. The first type was the summoning book used to summon monsters. The summoning of high-level magical creatures that were not automatically reborn required a summoning ritual and a corresponding amount of money before it could be carried out. The item required for the summoning ritual was the summoning book. If one did not use the summoning book but used summoning magic to summon monsters, then the monsters that were summoned were the most common and low-level monsters. The monsters that were summoned using the summoning book were not only very rare, but their levels were also much higher than ordinary monsters. Even their magic, skills, and races were very rare. The second type was the item book used to store magical props. Some special and precious magical props with very powerful effects and functions were stored in these item books. The third type was the magic book used to use them. In Yggdrasil, sometimes, if one wanted to change into a specific profession or race, they would need the corresponding items. Among them, there were many items in the form of books. For example, the Book of the Dead that could transform people into undead, the Seed of the Fallen that could transform people into demons, and the Wings of Ascension that could transform people into angels, and so on. Using these items could allow one to change into a specific profession or even race. In Yggdrasil, such items had different values depending on the race and class of the player. The magic book stored here was the kind of item that could be used to change one's profession or race to an extremely precious profession. The fourth type was the information book used to create equipment, items, and items. The creation of some precious equipment, items, and items could not be done by just anyone. It was like a blueprint. The creation of precious equipment, items, and items required these information books in addition to materials. With these information books, as long as one had the required forging skills and materials, one could create the items recorded in them. As for the fifth type, they were novels. Most of them were classic novels that were widely circulated in the original world, or novels with the background of the game as the story. There were even original novels written by players in Yggdrasil, as well as second novels and game guides. Noah's goal on this trip was the first 4 types of books. The summoning books and information books were intended to be given to Bade and Demiurgos for their use. They would be used to summon monsters and create items, thus expanding the power and influence of Nazarik's underground tomb. The item books and magic books had wonderful uses. Naturally, Noah wanted to collect them. While expanding the treasury, he also wanted to prepare for an emergency. Of course, most of the summoning books and information books here had backups. Noah also planned to collect those books. Perhaps, in other worlds, if he needed manpower or specific items, Noah could make preparations with these summoning books and information books. "It's just that there are so many books here," Noah exclaimed. Apart from the novels and guides, the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books are all very useful and precious. There are so many of them here. The main ones are the novels and guides. Compared to the novels and guides, the other 4 types of books don't even add up to 1% of the total, right? Bade said in an admiring tone. Even so, the number of summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books here is quite shocking. To be able to collect so many precious items, as expected of the supremes of the past. Demiurgos nodded in agreement. He then turned his head and looked at Noah. "Lord Noah, since you're here, would you like to see the scribe of the library?" "The scribe of the library?" Noah nodded as he recalled the information about this NPC. "That's fine. I also want to see how far the production of scrolls has progressed." After saying this, Noah walked forward. After an unknown amount of time, an inner door appeared in front of Noah. Bade and Demiurgos immediately went forward and opened the door. Immediately, a spacious room with huge bookshelves appeared in front of Noah's eyes. Upon closer inspection, the bookshelves were not filled with books, but with all kinds of miscellaneous items. There were ores, metals, gems, powders, and organs of unknown creatures on the bookshelves. These things were all materials needed to make scrolls. In addition, there was a large amount of parchment, either rolled up on the bookshelves or bundled up on the ground. They filled the entire room. In the center of the room was a large stone platform. On the side of the platform stood a skeleton. It was a skeleton that was a mixture of human and animal bones. It was only about 150 centimeters tall, had 2 horns on its head, 4 fingers, and hoof-shaped toes. It wore a long robe, had a turban on its head, and had pieces of cloth wrapped around its waist. Chapter 1239. Noah discovered that the skeleton standing at the edge of the stone platform not only had a strange appearance, but it was also wearing a lot of extraordinary equipment. A silver bracelet with 7 gems was worn on his wrist. On its neck was a golden amulet. On its fingers were rings of various shapes and colors. Its waist was also adorned with gem-like accessories, and there were also many scrolls tied to it. These equipment were all very powerful magic tools. Since it was able to wear so many magic tools, this seemingly extraordinary skeleton was naturally not an ordinary undying. Its name was Dietorius Anus Shectus. He was in charge of guarding this library and was given the position of scribe. He was an NPC who specialized in crafting professions. In terms of combat power and level, Dietorius was not as good as a group of guardians who had reached the maximum level of 100. However, in terms of crafting professions, Dietorius was the #1 person in charge of the entire Nasarik underground tomb. This was especially true for the production of scrolls, as the scribe was the one who took up most of the responsibility. Without this scribe, the various tools that could be produced in the Nasarik underground tomb would definitely be of a lower grade. Therefore, although Noah had not seen Dietorius before, he at least knew of his existence. On the other side, Dietorius, who was studying a piece of parchment spread out on the stone platform in front of him, finally seemed to notice the situation at the door and raised his head. In the next second, when he saw Noah being protected by Bade and Demiurgos, a scarlet light suddenly flashed in the eye sockets of Dietorius' skull, as if he was frightened and quickly walked out of the stone platform. Then, Dietorius respectfully knelt in front of Noah. Welcome, Lord Noah. Although they had not directly met each other, because of the settings, all the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb clearly knew who they were loyal to. In the past, Noah thought that if they had not met each other, the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb would not know that they were loyal to him. Therefore, he walked around the tomb with an indifferent attitude. In the end, there was almost a huge commotion. Since then, Noah understood that although the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb had not seen him before, they were very clear about his existence. At that moment, Noah was not surprised by Dietorius' reaction, and he smiled faintly. Sorry, I came without informing you. No, Lord Noah, you're too serious. There was no way to see the expression on Dietorius' skull face, but the sincerity in his voice could be heard. The entire Nazarick underground tomb belongs to Lord Noah. Here, Lord Noah can't go anywhere, including this place. Is that so? Noah smiled bitterly. I'm afraid that I'll disturb you. Aren't you making a scroll? It's just a scroll. How can it be more important than greeting the Honorable Supreme? Dietorius lowered his head. So, please don't say that, Lord Noah. That's true, but the scroll you make will not only strengthen the Nazarick underground tomb, but it will also be of great help to me. Noah shook his head and said to Dietorius. I'm also looking forward to the scroll you make, so you can speak with your head held high, Dietorius. It's my honor to be able to make the Honorable Supreme look forward to it. Dietorius seemed to be delighted. I will definitely not disappoint the Supreme Sovereign's expectations. Then I'll have to trouble you. Noah nodded and asked. Is the production of the scroll going smoothly? There has been a lot of progress so far, Dietorius said respectfully. At the very least, I can confirm that there are requirements for the parchment paper used to make scrolls with different levels of magical effects. Oh? Noah asked curiously. How should I put it? After experimenting, I can basically confirm that the parchment paper brought back from the surface can only be used to make magic scrolls of the second level, Dietorius said. As for the third level of magical effects, there's no way to use parchment paper to make them. Is that so? Noah frowned slightly. In other words, the parchment paper in this world isn't suitable for making scrolls? I'm not sure yet. It could also be that my method of making scrolls is different from the method of making scrolls in this world. Dietorius said truthfully. After all, I heard that the potions in this world are very different from the potions in the Nazarick underground tomb. In this world, under normal circumstances, there were 3 ways to make potions that were used as recovery potions. The first was a potion made from herbs. This kind of potion lacked speed and only had the effect of strengthening one's original abilities. For example, it could strengthen one's arm, recover one's stamina, or increase one's endurance. Not only was the effect not satisfactory, but there was also a big problem with the efficiency. The only advantage was that it was very cheap. The second was a potion made from a mixture of magic and herbs. The effect of this kind of potion would be faster than the first, but it still required time. Most adventurers preferred to use this kind of potion. After a battle, they would drink a bottle and slowly recover. The third type was a potion that was made using only magic. This kind of potion was made by injecting magic into an alchemy solution. The effect of the potion would be immediately apparent and had the same effect as the magic that was injected. It was similar to magic scrolls and magic tools that could only be used on oneself. Therefore, this kind of potion was also more expensive. Compared to these 3 kinds of potions, the potions in the Nazarick underground tomb were different. Judging from this, the difference in the production method had a big impact on the items that were made. With my production method, no matter how many times I experiment with the parchment paper that is brought back from the outside, as long as it is used to make scrolls that exceed the 3rd level, it will immediately be scrapped, Dietorius said regretfully. However, if you use higher-level paper materials, you can make higher-level magic scrolls. If you use the highest-level paper materials, such as dragon skin, you can even make a 10th-level magic scroll without any problems. Dragon skin? Noah was deep in thought. Dragon skin was, of course, a high-level item that couldn't be any higher. After all, whether it was this world, the game, or even the other worlds, creatures like dragons were generally more powerful creatures. In this world, dragons were even known as the strongest race. The skin that could only be obtained after hunting dragons was naturally extremely precious. However, there were many dragon skins in the Nasaric underground tomb's treasure hall. It was an item that the members of Ains ul Gong spent a lot of effort to obtain. If it took so much effort to do so in the game, it would be even more difficult to do so in this world. It is said that in this world, dragons are the most powerful creatures, and they are also very rare, Dietorius said. In a situation where we can't guarantee a way to obtain dragon skin, I think that it is better to limit the use of the precious dragon skin. Without a supply, it is undoubtedly foolish to use it continuously. Upon hearing this, Noah chuckled and said, "Don't worry. If it is dragon skin, you can use it as much as you want." Dietorius couldn't help but be stunned. "Don't worry, I have a way to ensure that the dragon skin resources will not be cut off." Noah suddenly smiled. "So, you can use it as much as you want?" "Yes," Dietorius immediately replied. Noah thought of the many resources that could be automatically replenished in the Gate of Babylon. Among them, dragon skin was included. "It seems that I can take out a lot of resources for Nasaric to use." Thinking of this, Noah looked at Yair Bade and Demiurgos. "Get someone to come here and choose the summoning books and information books that need to be used, and prepare a backup. Also, arrange the item books and magic books. I want to bring them with me." "Yes." Yair Bade and Demiurgos bowed their heads and accepted the order. Chapter 1240. Although he had asked Yair Bade and Demiurgos to organize the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books, it was not a task that could be completed in a short period of time. After all, the number of books in the library on the 10th floor of the underground tomb in Nasaric was simply outrageous. This library was the largest one Noah had ever seen, be it in terms of size or collection of books. Fortunately, more than 99% of the books were just simple strategies and novels. Although the remaining 1% of summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books were just as numerous, it would not take too long to organize them, even if it could not be completed in a short period of time. With the manpower that Yair Bade and Demiurgos had gathered, it would probably take about 2 to 3 days. Under such circumstances, Noah directly handed the task of organizing the library to Yair Bade and Demiurgos. He then stayed in the library for an entire day, reading the novels and strategies with great interest, and only left the library when it was dark. Along with Noah, Yair Bade left as well. On the way to his room, Noah sensed the aura following closely behind him. He was speechless as he turned around to look at Yair Bade. "Yair Bade, why have you been following me? I was thinking that Lord Noah must be very tired after a busy day today, right?" Yair Bade said with a smile that was as gentle as a goddess, but there was no smile in his eyes. "So, as your subordinate, please at least allow me to watch Lord Noah fall asleep. Otherwise, I won't be at ease." "Is that so?" Noah rubbed his eyebrows, and said directly. "Then, what is the truth?" His words made the gentle smile on Yair Bade's face become slightly distorted, and he became as sinister as a demon. "How can I watch Satya beat me to it?" Those were Yair Bade's heartfelt words. Yair Bade remembered them clearly. In the morning, when Noah decided to punish Satya, he asked her to go to his room at night. A man and a woman alone in a room with a punishment? Who wouldn't be worried? At the very least, Yair Bade couldn't be at ease. How can he do such an enviable thing with Satya alone? Yair Bade's body was emitting a black aura, and his smile became more and more twisted. "That's not a punishment at all, but the best reward. That fellow, Satya, actually accepted it with a clear conscience. As a guardian, she's too unqualified." Seeing that Yair Bade was about to go crazy, Noah's eyes twitched. He could only sigh and look at Yair Bade with narrowed eyes. "In other words, you want me to do the same to you, right?" That's right. The black smoke around Yairbaid's body instantly disappeared without a trace. His face was flushed red, and he began to twist and turn in an extremely intoxicated manner. May the benevolent and merciful Supreme Sovereign bestow upon me an equal reward, no punishment. Upon hearing this, Noah stared at Yairbaid speechlessly. Under Noah's gaze, Yairbaid gradually woke up from his intoxicated state, and his pretty face suddenly became somewhat unnatural. That. May I ask what I did wrong? No, you didn't do anything wrong. Noah suddenly smiled, and it was an extremely mischievous smile. However, since it's the request of the chief guardian, who has worked hard and performed a great service, then I'll fulfill your wish and let you suffer the same punishment as Satya. Seeing Noah's smile, for some reason, Yairbaid had an ominous premonition in his heart. However, this ominous premonition was immediately drowned out by ecstasy. Finally. Yairbaid's tears flowed out. I finally waited for the time when the Supreme Sovereign will favor me. While saying this, Yairbaid seemed to have thought of something. He twitched the tip of his nose and sniffed his own body. Then, his expression changed, and he hurriedly said to Noah, Lord Noah, please give me some time. I'll go take a bath first. After saying this, Yairbaid slipped away with a whoosh and disappeared without a trace. What bath are you taking? Noah looked in the direction Yairbaid had left, and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Anyway, it's not something that can only be done after taking a bath. After saying this, Noah turned around, feeling amused. However, when he turned around, a figure with a fragrant body and a bright smile appeared in front of Noah's eyes. I'm done. Lord Noah. Isn't this a little too fast? 3 minutes later, Noah brought Yairbaid, who had taken a quick bath and was in an extremely good mood, to the door of his room. Yairbaid's face was full of anticipation, and his eyes were surging with desire as he thought about what would happen next. Inside, Shatiya was holding a mirror and constantly looking at herself. Her pretty face was full of blush, and she looked like a young girl in love. In response, Noah inwardly chuckled and walked over. As soon as she heard footsteps, Shatiya immediately stopped what she was doing and looked over with anticipation and joy. When she saw Noah's figure, Shesha's tender and cute face was filled with heartfelt joy. However, when Shatiya saw Yairbaid behind Noah, the blush and joy on her face froze and became dangerous. Why are you here? He didn't even need to think to know who he was talking to. Facing Shesha's dangerous expression, Yairbaid looked at her with a provocative gaze and spoke with a victorious expression. Lord Noah has decided to give me the same reward. No, punishment. So, Shatiya, I'm here to be punished with you. Together? Shesha's expression became even more dangerous, and she looked at Yairbaid with murderous eyes. You hateful slut, how dare you ruin my plans, what? Don't tell me you don't want to be together? Yairbaid looked down at Shatiya condescendingly and said. In that case, you can ask Lord Noah to waive your punishment. I can bear it alone. How is that possible? Shatiya yelled with a fierce expression. Fine, let's do it together. It's better than letting you beat me to it. Don't think that we'll be tied if we do it together. Yairbaid also revealed a sinister expression. I'll definitely make Lord Noah punish me first. Humph. Shatiya snorted in disdain. Let's wait and see. As a result, the two guardians of the underground tomb glared at each other, and there were even sparks in their gazes. Little did they know that looking at Yairbaid and Shatiya, the smile on Noah's face was also very bright. It was a smile that looked like a prank that was about to succeed. When Yairbaid and Shatiya entered the room under Noah's lead and arrived in the hall, the two girls saw it at the same time. There was a crystal ball on the table in the hall. It was something that wasn't originally in this room. Lord Noah? Yairbaid asked in puzzlement. What's this? Are you talking about this crystal ball? Noah stepped forward and patted the huge crystal ball. This is your next punishment. Our next punishment? Yerbade and Shatia were stunned on the spot. Seeing this, Noah shrugged and slowly stroked the crystal ball. The next moment, the crystal ball suddenly lit up and a scene appeared. It was a scene of many densely packed black dots crawling on the ground. This is... Shatia said with some uncertainty. Ants? Yes. The densely packed black dots crawling on the ground were all ants. Both of you, listen carefully, Noah suddenly said. Next, you will stay here and count ants. Count. Count ants? Yerbade and Shatia were completely stunned. That's right, and you have to count until dawn, Noah said with a faint smile. Tomorrow, I will ask you how many ants are crawling on the crystal ball. If you answer correctly, your punishment will be over. If you answer incorrectly, you will continue counting the next night. If you keep answering incorrectly, you will continue counting. This is your punishment. Yerbade and Shesha's vision turned black at the same time and they fell to the ground. Chapter 1241. The next day, when Noah woke up from his sleep, the familiar soft touch and body temperature in front of him awakened the rest of his muddled consciousness. Opening his eyes, Noah felt the light weight in front of him as he reached out and slowly lifted the blanket. In the next moment, a cute elf girl appeared in Noah's field of vision. Huff. Huff, the girl seemed to still be in a deep sleep. Her extremely subtle breathing sound faintly rose and fell in the silent space, making the air seem to carry a slight fragrance. The silver-white long hair was extremely soft as it hung down her slender and white back, covering the elf girl's entire back. The elf girl was completely naked, only wearing a pair of black knee socks. She hugged Noah's neck as usual, snuggling into Noah's embrace, directly pressing down on Noah's body as she slept sweetly. Who else could it be other than Aster? This familiar scene made Noah's expression involuntarily relax. Gently stroking Aster's soft silver-white hair and looking at the elf girl's naked body in his arms, Noah didn't have any evil thoughts in his heart, only warmth. Under normal circumstances, as long as there was no one beside Noah, then the next morning, Noah would find Aster in the same state, sleeping in his arms. It wasn't that Noah hadn't tried to wake up in the middle of the night. However, Aster didn't appear in this state in the middle of the night. Thus, Noah judged that Aster should only wake up in the morning, turn into her human form, lie in his arms, and continue to sleep. Then, after dawn, if Aster woke up earlier than Noah, then this elf girl would use all kinds of methods that would excite a healthy male to wake Noah up. If Noah had woken up earlier than Aster, he would have seen this young lady who looked more like an animal than an elf appear in this form. Thus, Noah lovingly kissed the tip of Aster's nose, then quietly got up and quietly got off the bed without waking Aster up. Covering Aster with the blanket, Noah smoothed the bangs in front of the sleeping Aster's forehead, then straightened up and began to wash up. Walking out of the bedroom, the hall appeared in front of Noah's eyes. Noah gently closed the bedroom door and cast his gaze into the hall. There, Yerbade and Zaisha were sitting side by side at the table in the hall. On the table, a large crystal ball was still playing the scene of a group of densely packed ants crawling across the ground. Yerbade and Zaisha stared at this scene, as if they were broken puppets, muttering in a daze, 13768548813. 13768548814. 13768548815. It was clear that the two girls were still counting the ants. Looking at Yerbade and Zaisha shaking their heads and muttering absent-mindedly like broken puppets, Noah felt a little guilty. Poor Yerbade and Zaisha were full of expectations that Noah would favor them, but in the end, they were met with a cruel punishment. The feeling of falling from heaven to hell must be very uncomfortable, right? Moreover, the two girls' punishment was to count ants for a night. The densely packed ants crawling across the surface of the crystal ball at a rather fast speed. Not to mention counting for a night, even counting for a minute would make one feel dizzy and faint, right? However, it was precisely because of this that it could be considered a punishment. If he really punished Zaisha severely, then Noah wouldn't be able to bear it. But if the punishment was too light, then it wouldn't be able to eliminate the guilt in Zaysha's heart. In that case, how could he make Zaysha feel afraid and punished without causing any substantial damage? This was the method that Noah thought of. Presumably, even Zaysha would go crazy from counting ants for a night, right? Moreover, Zaysha's patience wasn't very good to begin with, so it would be even more effective as a punishment. As for Yair Bade, it would be an undeserved calamity. Well, as demons and vampires, Yair Bade and Zaysha were creatures that did not need to sleep or eat, and they were races that did not tire. It was not a bad thing to have some fun. Of course, even if the two girls counted wrongly, Noah did not intend to let them continue. If they really had to count like this every night, then even demons and vampires would probably go crazy. Thus, Noah approached the two girls with a faint smile on his face. Okay, Yair Bade, Zaysha, you can stop now. After Noah's voice sounded, the two girls looked up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They looked at Noah blankly with a melancholy expression. Seeing how Yair Bade and Zaysha were staring at him blankly, the faint smile on Noah's face began to slowly disappear and was replaced by a trace of worry. Don't tell me that Yair Bade and Zaysha have really gone crazy from counting ants for an entire night? Just as Noah was worried about this, Yair Bade suddenly lowered his head slowly, letting the bangs in front of his forehead cover his expression, and his body trembled slightly. That appearance made Noah feel a little scared. Yeah. Yair Bade? Noah asked with some trepidation. You. What's wrong with you? At this moment, Yair Bade suddenly moved. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, a force exploded in Noah's arms, making Noah lose his balance. Noah only felt his vision spinning, and then there was another impact on his back. The scene on the ceiling was fixed in Noah's vision. In other words, Noah was now lying on the ground. Moreover, he was knocked down by an abnormally soft object. As for what that abnormally soft object was, there was no need to guess. Sir Noah, Yair Bade, who was riding on Noah and pressing Noah down, raised his upper body and met Noah's gaze. At this moment, Noah discovered that Yair Bade's beautiful gem-like pupils were slightly enlarged, like a snake eyeing its prey. This made Noah shiver all over. Yeah. Yair Bade? Noah's voice couldn't help but raise a little due to panic. You. What are you doing? In the face of Noah's questioning, who had lost his calm and had fallen into a state of panic, Yair Bade acted as if he didn't hear anything. It was as if he was completely immersed in his own world and couldn't hear anything from the outside world. I can't hold it in anymore. Yair Bade said drunkenly, as if he was drunk. I keep telling myself. I have to hold on. I have to hold on. As long as I hold on, until I finish counting the ants, then I will be able to obtain Sir Noah's favor. Now. Now. Finally, this moment has come. Right? Cold. Calm down, Yair Bade. Noah could only struggle to get up. Get off of me first. However, no matter how much Noah struggled, there was no way for him to break free from Yair Bade's restraints. My level has already reached LV4, and my all ability is at the SSS stage. In terms of physical ability, I am stronger than Hercules, who descended in the form of a servant, but there is no way for me to push Yair Bade away. In fact, Noah couldn't push Yair Bade away. Firstly, it was because Yair Bade was a max-level warrior character with extremely high physical attributes. Secondly, it was because the place he touched was too soft, so Noah couldn't use his full strength. In such a situation, Yair Bade murmured in a daze. It's all Sir Noah's fault. Undoubtedly, I'm looking forward to it, but I can't get what I want. That's right. It's all Sir Noah's fault. The corners of Noah's mouth began to twitch. It was at this time that Syataya made her move. That's right. It's all Lord Noah's fault. Zaysha stood up shakily and suddenly raised her head. Like a predator, she bared her fangs and brandished her claws as she pounced towards Noah. It's all Sir Noah's fault. Noah was directly pounced on. Together with the two girls, he rolled on the ground in a sorry state. That's enough. Noah couldn't stand it anymore and roared. Chapter 1242. Noah's Gate of Babylon was a treasure trove jointly built by Gaia and Alea, the two suppressive forces. Even the hero King Gilgamesh, who claimed to have all the treasures of an era, could only stare at the treasures inside. Noah's Gate of Babylon had all kinds of rare resources such as fine steel, dragon skin, and so on. In addition, Noah's Gate of Babylon had the ability to automatically replenish consumables. There were many resources that were extremely precious in the eyes of others, but they were inexhaustible and inexhaustible. For the development of the underground tomb in Nasarek, Noah asked Yair-Beed and Demiurgos to sort out all the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books in the library to enrich the Gate of Babylon. At the same time, he also took out many of the precious resources in the Gate of Babylon and provided them to the underground tomb in Nasarek for use. With these precious resources, the production of all kinds of items in the underground tomb in Nasarek would definitely be fruitful. As for the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books that Yair-Beed and Demiurgos sorted out, they were all put into Noah's Gate of Babylon. Yair-Beed and Demiurgos took the copies of the summoning books and information books with them. They also took a large amount of gold coins from Noah and prepared to summon high-level monsters. They also started to let the NPCs in the crafting department use the information books to create all kinds of equipment, items. As for the summoning books, considering that the space in the underground tomb in Nasarek was limited, Yair-Beed and Demiurgos still needed to discuss how to use them. Otherwise, if they only carried out the summoning, the sudden increase in the population of the underground tomb in Nasarek would definitely cause these monsters to become a burden. Therefore, what kind of monsters to summon? What kind of monsters to summon, what kind of monsters to summon, what kind of monsters to summon, what kind of requirements there were in terms of race, profession, skills, and magic, etc., were all things that needed to be discussed. Noah handed all of this over to Yair-Beed and Demiurgos. It wasn't that Noah wanted to be a hands-off manager. It was just that Yair-Beed and Demiurgos were definitely more familiar with the situation in the Great Graveyard in Nasarek than Noah. Moreover, he was much more familiar with it. Since that was the case, rather than getting involved, it was better to let Yair-Beed and Demiurgos take full responsibility to prevent them from ruining things. Noah did not want to give orders carelessly due to insufficient information and cause something like Shadia to happen again. Therefore, it was better to leave everything here to Yair-Beed and Demiurgos. As for Noah himself, he would occasionally listen to the reports from Yair-Beed and Demiurgos, and learn about the operation of each floor of the Great Tomb of Nasarek from the other guardians. When he was free, he would check on the management system in the throne room. His days were quite fulfilling. On this day, Noah was browsing through the management system in the throne room. Through the management system's display of the operation of the Great Tomb of Nasarek, Noah could easily see that the number of monsters in the entire stronghold was increasing. In addition, various facilities responsible for producing equipment, items were also operating in full swing. Presumably, every once in a while, these facilities would produce a batch of equipment, items to fill the inventory of the Great Tomb of Nasarek, right? It's going well, Noah said as he flipped through the main window that appeared in front of him. If it continues to develop at such a high speed, can the supply of resources be maintained? The problem with gold coins was no longer a problem after confirming that no matter what kind of gold coin it was, as long as it contained gold, it could be used. However, producing equipment, items not only required gold coins, but also various materials. Although Noah's treasure trove had almost everything, it was only relative to the shaped moon world. In this world and the game world, there were many things that were not in Noah's treasure trove. Otherwise, Noah would not be tempted by the items in the treasure hall and library of the Great Tomb of Nasarek. The resources in the treasure trove are not lacking, but the resources that are not in the treasure trove are limited. Noah said thoughtfully. Should I slightly control the projects that consume limited resources? Just as Noah was thinking about this problem, outside the door in front of him, a figure slowly walked in. It was Annabelle. Aware of Annabelle's arrival, Noah raised his head slightly and looked over. At the same time, Annabelle said such a sentence to Noah with a rather serious expression. "Sir Noah, there is an intruder." Noah's eyebrows suddenly raised. On the ground quite far away from the great tomb of Nasarek where the throne hall was located, outside the great tomb of Nasarek that presented the scene of a tomb, 2 uninvited guests were welcomed. "Wow! I didn't expect there to really be a tomb here. You scared me." At the entrance, Clementine pointed at the tomb in front of her with a frivolous and exaggerated attitude and said with a laugh, "There is actually a tomb in the middle of this grassland, isn't this too strange? Right? Right?" "Humph." Looking at the extremely pretentious Clementine, Cadget snorted coldly, but also showed a somewhat excited smile. "I didn't expect there to be such a harvest. This is really unexpected." Clementine and Cadget came here only to find the magic chanter who scared away Ylantel's adventurers and had the ability to summon extremely powerful undeads. Because Cadget often dealt with undeads, he had a certain ability to track down the unique negative energy of undeads. When he planned to track down the powerful undeads that were summoned, he unexpectedly discovered this tomb. Clementine grinned, but her eyes cast a sharp gaze like that of a ferocious beast, sweeping the interior of the tomb. Clementine could clearly see. In the tomb, the grass had been carefully cut, and she could see at a glance that someone was carrying out regular maintenance. Needless to say, there must be people who come here often. Clementine looked at the ancestral hall in the center of the tomb and showed a ferocious smile like that of a predator. There might even be people who are like little Cadget, living directly with those dead fellows. Who knows? I just don't know if that person is the one we are looking for. Cadget sneered again and again. The only thing we can be sure of is that there is very powerful negative energy in this tomb, and there is definitely very powerful undeads inside. It was precisely because of this that Cadget felt both excited and nervous. He was excited because since there was a very powerful undeads here, it meant that there was a large number of low-level undeads, which could allow the powerful undeads to be born. The existence of a large number of undeads meant a large amount of negative energy. Cadget's goal was precisely this negative energy. However, facing such an undead's army that had a powerful undeads as their commander, could the 2 of them win? This was what made Cadget nervous. "What?" Clementine said in a light tone. "Little Cadget, are you scared?" "What about you?" Cadget looked at Clementine speechlessly. "Aren't you scared?" "Scared?" Clementine seemed to be amused, laughing loudly in a way that was completely unlike a young girl. That laughter was extremely sharp, so sharp that it was even a little disgusting. With such a loud laugh, Clementine held her abdomen, and her voice carried a hair-raising cruelty. "Although I don't know what is inside, but I have already surpassed mortals and reached the hero domain, so I definitely can't lose." However, just as such a sentence fell from Clementine's mouth, a mocking voice suddenly sounded, and very clearly drilled into Clementine and Cadget's ears. "Hero domain? That's really amazing, isn't it? I'm a little scared." Chapter 1243. The voice that suddenly echoed in the entire space came so abruptly. The cruel smile on Clementine's face suddenly froze on her face, and Cadget's expression also changed abruptly, making the entire atmosphere tense. The first to calm down was Clementine. While Cadget's expression was still changing wildly, Clementine restrained her expression, raised her head, and cast her sharp gaze like that of a carnivorous beast towards the cemetery in front of her. She saw that in the cemetery, a figure was slowly walking out from the path in front of the centermost large ancestral hall. "Although I really want to ask how you found this place." Saying this, Noah walked out of the cemetery while watching Clementine and Cadget, and his eyes gradually narrowed. "But, if you think about it carefully, I didn't purposely get people to hide the large underground tomb in Nasarek, so it's natural that it would be found, right?" That being said, Clementine and Cadget obviously didn't come to the large underground tomb in Nasarek by chance. Whether it was Clementine or Cadget, although they were surprised by Noah's appearance, they weren't surprised. Clearly, these two uninvited guests had come prepared. Or rather, Clementine and Cadget came for Noah. Oh. Is there really someone here? Clementine's somewhat unsightly smile hung on her face again, but her gaze was always sizing up Noah. Hey, don't tell me you're the one who scared the hell out of those adventurers in Ylanter? What? Is that your friend? Noah stopped and looked at Clementine from a distance as he spoke lightly. You don't look like you're here to avenge someone. That kind of thing, no matter what. Clementine tilted her neck and grinned like a broken doll. I just want to confirm if you're interesting, that's enough. Is that so? Noah muttered to himself for a while, then looked at Cadget as if he was no longer interested in Clementine. Then, what are you here for? I heard you're a magic chanter who can summon extremely powerful undead. Cadget gripped the black staff in his hand tightly and stared at Noah. Why don't you let me see how your summoning magic is? Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows and finally smiled. In other words, if you're not here to pick a fight, then you're here to challenge me, right? Pick a fight? Challenge me? Clementine was startled at first, then burst out laughing. Good. That's a good way of putting it. I like that way of putting it. In the next second, Clementine's laughter came to an abrupt halt. A killing intent that was as sharp as a blade that made one's skin hurt suddenly erupted from her body. That's right. I'm here to pick a fight. As soon as she finished speaking, Clementine stomped her feet on the ground and shot forward. In the meantime, in Clementine's hand, a short awl suddenly flashed and was held in her hand. As she waved it, it tore the air apart. With a sharp sound of wind breaking, Clementine flashed in front of Noah with a sneer. That speed was as fast as the wind. Shio dash. In the next moment, the sharp short awl was stabbed out by Clementine. The target was Noah's eyes. Ding dash. A crisp sound of collision shook the air slightly. It was the sound of a finger blocking the short awl that was piercing towards him like a bullet with the tip of his finger. I see. Ignoring Clementine's surprised expression, Noah said understandingly. In other words, I don't have to show you mercy, right? As soon as he finished speaking. Bang dash. A burst of violent magic rose from Noah's body and turned into a substantial shockwave that suddenly shook and surged out. Dong dash. In a low muffled sound, Clementine was directly sent flying by the substantial shockwave of magic. Her feet brushed against the ground and she was forced to retreat a distance of more than 10 meters before she could stabilize herself. Tisk. Clementine held her chest that hurt from the shockwave and made a speechless sound. That bastard, not only is he a magic chanter, but he's also a monk. Although Clementine's short awl did not have high lethality, it could not be more fragile than a human body. To be able to use a finger to block the sharp short awl, there was no other possibility other than a monk who could train his body to the strength of various metals. No, maybe that guy activated some defensive magic when I didn't know, or maybe it was the power of some magic tool. Clementine overturned her previous guess. How can a magic chanter who has the ability to summon a powerful immortal also be a monk at the same time? Noah raised his eyes slightly in response to Clementine's self-muttering guess. He looked at her and said with a faint smile on his face. Is that so? After saying that, Noah's body suddenly shook, and his figure disappeared on the spot. Clementine's eyes shrunk, and without hesitation, she stomped on the ground and retreated. However, just as Clementine's figure retreated, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared behind her and reached out a hand and put it on Clementine's back. Feeling the touch of the hand on her back, Clementine's face finally changed. Then, a voice entered Clementine's ears. Are you a magic chanter? Or a monk? Why don't you guess again, a big shot who has stepped into the realm of heroes? At this moment, Clementine felt like there was a knife on her neck, and an extremely strong sense of crisis rose in her heart. It was only then that Clementine understood. Whether it was a magic chanter or a monk. As long as Noah slightly moved the hand on Clementine's back, Clementine's end was obvious. Without any hesitation, Clementine almost subconsciously turned around and fiercely thrust out the short awl in her hand. However, at the same time, a fist mixed with a terrifying wind carried a chilling momentum and directly smashed in Clementine's direction. At this moment, the sense of crisis in Clementine's heart surged to the peak. Clementine's battle instincts, cultivated from years of desperately struggling between life and death, told her. If she received this punch, she would be seriously injured even if she didn't die. Clementine, who had completely lost her composure, suddenly screamed. Unyielding stronghold. At this critical moment, Clementine used a skill that was like a warrior's trump card, a martial technique. A superb martial technique that could allow the user's defense to rise to the level of a city wall in an instant, unyielding stronghold. Therefore, in the next moment, the fist carrying a terrifying wind collided with the short awl that suddenly flashed with the light of a martial technique. Bang! In the sound of something exploding, the short awl collided with the fist carrying a terrifying wind. The short awl, whose defense was raised to the level of a city wall in an instant, was actually directly blasted apart by the frightening strength of the fist. Crack! The terrifying fist's undiminished momentum caused Clementine's wrist, which was holding the short awl, to produce a cracking sound, instantly bending into an angle that made one's teeth ache. Before Clementine could scream, a leg turned into a black shadow, wildly lashing out like a long whip, and lashing Clementine's side waist. Bang! In the sound of a muffled blow, Clementine violently spat out a mouthful of blood, and her figure flew out, heavily smashing into a tombstone. The tombstone was smashed into pieces of gravel, directly burying Clementine. At this moment, Noah seemed to flash out of thin air, glancing at the pile of gravel that buried Clementine's figure, then turned around and looked at the shocked Kadjit. So, it's your turn next. Hearing this, Kadjit couldn't help but take a step back, and roared with fear on his face. You. Who are you? Only now do you remember to ask for someone else's name? Noah laughed out loud. But, that's not important anymore, I just need to know that you came with ill intentions, and that's enough. Chapter 1244. The cool breeze, mixed with the smell of soil, blew through the surface graveyard of Nazarik's underground graveyard, causing the tense atmosphere in the air to suddenly become heavy. Looking at Noah, who was standing against the wind with his robe fluttering in the breeze, Kadjit's expression became extremely ugly. However, compared to his ugly expression, Kadjit's heart was more terrified of Noah. How is this possible? Kadjit murmured in disbelief. How can there be a guy who can defeat that woman so easily? Kadjit did not have a good impression of Clementine. There was no other reason other than that Clementine was a person with a personality defect. In the Celian theocracy, there were a total of 6 special intelligence units, and the unit called the Dark Scripture was the most special one. It was not like the Sunshine Scripture, which had hundreds of people, and there were only a few dozen of them. However, the Dark Scripture, formed by these dozen of people, was the trump card of the entire Celian theocracy. There was only one condition to be able to join the Dark Scripture. That was to at least reach the level of a hero. In other words, in the Dark Scripture, every member had to be at least level 29, and their strength was comparable to the highest level of a fine steel adventurer. Clementine came from such a unit where everyone was at the level of a hero. However, Clementine betrayed the Dark Scripture. The reason was that Clementine wanted to snatch a magical tool that was not of much use to her on a whim. Since then, Clementine betrayed the Dark Scripture, revealing her ferocious and cruel side. This woman loved to torture people. Moreover, no matter if it was an enemy or an innocent passerby, as long as Clementine had that thought, she would not hesitate to use the cruelest methods to torture people. Kadjit was not a good person. Otherwise, he would not have wanted to turn the entire Ylantir into a dead city for his own purpose, to collect negative energy. However, it was impossible for Kadjit to have a good impression of such a person with a personality defect. However, He had to admit that at least, in terms of strength, Clementine was indeed quite strong. Kadjit believed that even if Gudjefu was the strongest warrior in the kingdom, Clementine would still be able to fight him to a draw. How could such a person be defeated in 2 or 3 moves by this man of unknown origin? What kind of joke was this? What? Aren't you coming over? Seeing Kadjit's ugly face, Noah sneered. You're the ones who came looking for trouble, and I've personally come out to accept the challenge. Why don't you show some promise? Don't underestimate me. Kadjit's heart was filled with anger as he whispered in a hoarse voice. Even if you can defeat that person with a personality defect, as a magic chanter, you will never be able to defeat me. With these words, Kadjit raised the hand that wasn't holding the black staff. In that hand, there was a pitch-black bead, so black that it was beginning to turn purple. Clementine had once said that the summoning magic that Kadjit could use was of a lower level, but it could be amplified through precious magical tools and unleash great power. That magic tool was the bead in Kadjit's hand. Just watch. The power of my orb of death. Kadjit roared loudly. Come out for me. Bone Dragon. As his voice fell, a dazzling light suddenly flickered on the pitch-black orb. Following the activation of the magic tool called the Orb of Death, the entire ground began to tremble. Noah's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. With his outstanding sensing ability, Noah could clearly feel it. Underground, there were 2 more auras. Gotcha! Immediately after, the ground in front of Kadjit cracked and slowly protruded. Peng dash! The protruding ground suddenly exploded, revealing 2 gargantuan figures. They were 2 colossal creatures that were more than 3 meters tall and formed from countless human bones, with long necks and bones forming wings. Impressively, they were bone dragons. Roar dash! The 2 bone dragons' eye sockets flashed with ominous glints as they faced Noah's direction and let out a roar that shook the atmosphere. Ha 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 ha! Just watch. This is the power of the Orb of Death. The appearance of the bone dragon seemed to have restored Kadjit's confidence, and he let out an unpleasant laugh. The bone dragons have an absolute resistance to magic. No matter what kind of magic chanter you are, they are invincible natural enemies. Even if you defeat that person with a flawed personality, as a magic chanter, you definitely can't win against 2 bone dragons. Kadjit, who was laughing like this, didn't notice. Noah, who stood against the wind amidst the sound waves emitted by the 2 bone dragons, had traces of interest and ridicule in his eyes. The interest was towards the Orb of Death in Kadjit's hands. Although he didn't know what kind of magic tool it was, there wasn't such an item in the large underground tomb of Nassarik, which made Noah quite interested. As for the ridicule, it was directed towards Kadjit. In the battle with Clementine just now, Noah didn't even use a single spell. The whole battle was mainly close combat. In the end, Kadjit still thought that Noah was a magic chanter. He was really stupid beyond belief. At that moment, Noah sighed expressionlessly and raised a hand. 2 golden ripples, like water waves, suddenly fluctuated in the space on both sides of Noah's body. 2 long spears popped out, like arrows knocked on a bowstring, and suddenly aimed at the 2 huge bone dragons. Kadjit only saw 2 golden lights suddenly flash in front of his eyes. That was the scene of the 2 long spears explosively shooting out, flying towards the 2 bone dragons like meteors. Immediately after, the 2 long spears, which were extremely small compared to the bone dragons, fell on the bone dragons like beams of light. Pung! The sound of the collision neatly overlapping each other resounded. The 2 bone dragons were directly blown apart by the 2 long spears, turning into bones that filled the sky, sprinkling down from midair. Kadjit was aghast. Noah ignored the horrified Kadjit and cast his gaze on the orb in his hand. You seem to be holding something interesting. Then take it as my reward for accompanying you for so long. Noah lifted his feet and walked in the direction of Kadjit. Kadjit's face was filled with fear as he staggered backwards. Pung! At this moment, a muffled explosion resounded. Only to see that the pile of stones formed by the smashed tombstones suddenly burst open, and a figure scuttled out from within. Gale break. This was a martial skill that could increase speed. Flowing water acceleration. This was a martial skill that could accelerate the nerves, make movements break through the limits of the body, and increase attack speed and movement speed at the same time. Super evasion. This was a martial skill that could increase agility. Ability enhancement. This was a martial skill that could increase physical ability. Ability enhancement. This was a martial skill that could increase physical ability by a large margin. Generally speaking, a warrior could only use one type of martial skill at the same time. A few people could use two types at the same time, and only those who were truly strong could use 3 or 4 types at the same time. Even a fine steel adventurer could only use about 5 types of martial skills at the same time. At this moment, one hand was twisted into an impossible angle. Clementine, whose mouth was still full of blood, used 5 types of martial skills at the same time. With a ferocious expression like a ghost, she violently shot towards Noah's direction. Die for me. In the sharp roar, Clementine, who used 5 types of martial skills to strengthen her body at the same time, flew behind Noah with unprecedented speed. The short awl in her hand was like an arrow that pierced through the sky. In the ear-piercing sound of the air breaking, she violently stabbed towards Noah's back. Once she made a move, it was a fatal blow. Ding! Unfortunately, in the crisp sound of the collision, that violent short awl was blocked by a finger. Just like at the beginning. It's not over yet. Clementine roared out, and fiercely clenched the short awl in her hand. Pung! In the next moment, the short awl suddenly burst into a burst of flames, covering Noah's entire body. Chapter 1245. Peng dash. Bright flames rose up in the cemetery, turning the fiery red flames into monstrous heat waves that completely covered Noah's body. The scalding flames burned in the center of the cemetery, causing the surrounding temperature to suddenly rise, causing the atmosphere to become scalding hot. Ha 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 dash. Clementine, whose hand was twisted to an impossible angle and whose mouth was still bleeding, laughed like a maniac. Go to hell. You bastard. While laughing like this, Clementine continued to turn the short awl in her hand with a ferocious expression. Peng 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 dash. Suddenly, in a series of continuous explosions, waves of shocking flames exploded from the short awl in Clementine's hand, causing the thick flames to carry a scalding heat wave and expand in the surroundings. Seeing this scene, Kadjit, who was retreating in a sorry state due to his fear of Noah, couldn't help but be overjoyed. Clementine's weapon had an additional spell that could accumulate magic. This additional spell could accumulate all kinds of magic and store all of these magic in the weapon, allowing Clementine's short awl to have the ability to use all kinds of magic. It could be considered a rather special magic tool. However, the magic accumulated in the weapon was the same as other consumable magic tools. Each time it was used, it would be used up, unless new magic was injected and accumulated. Now, Clementine had released the 3rd rank spell accumulated in the short awl, Fireball, all at once. Being bombarded by so many 3rd rank spells at close range, Kadjit didn't believe that anyone could survive unscathed. Unfortunately, the joy on Kadjit's face quickly froze as he thought this. Because, in the center of the surging flames, a black shadow quietly appeared. Swish dash. A hand suddenly reached out from the magma-like flames at an extremely shocking speed. Clementine, who was immersed in the pleasure of using violence, didn't even have time to react before her neck was directly grabbed by the hand that suddenly reached out from the flames in front of her. Then, that hand was like a pair of pliers, slowly tightening. Goo dash. Clementine's maniacal laughter from a second ago was immediately replaced by a suffocating sound of anguish. Her hands almost subconsciously tightened around the hand that was strangling her neck, and her beast-like face began to turn red. It was only at this moment that another hand reached out from the scorching flames. As if dispelling the smoke, it suddenly waved. Peng dash. Accompanied by a muffled explosion, the flames that carried an astonishing amount of heat were directly scattered, turning into sparks that filled the sky and gradually disappeared. You seem to like violence? Noah, who was completely unscathed, held Clementine tightly. He looked at Clementine, whose face was starting to turn red. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he looked at Clementine, who was being held in the air by him. Clementine's beautiful face was faintly red. I wonder if someone like you would also like to be treated with the same kind of violence by others? As he spoke, Noah continued to tighten his grip, causing Clementine to repeatedly let out pained cries. Her eyes began to roll back, and her feet that were suspended in the air kept kicking, like a struggling frog. It was an unbearable sight. Watching the scene of Clementine, who had reached the hero domain, struggling like a powerless child in Noah's hands, Kadjit only felt that all the strength in his body was dissipating. His body went limp, and he sat on the ground. Kadjit didn't even have the strength to hold the black staff, and let it fall to the ground. He used the rest of his strength to hold the pearl of death. His hands trembled, and he looked at Noah with eyes full of fear. Monster. At this time, only boundless fear and regret emerged in Kadjit's heart. Fear was naturally fear of Noah. Regret was that he shouldn't have been convinced by Clementine, who had a personality flaw, to come here and face this monster in front of him. Warriors who had reached the hero domain were completely vulnerable in his hands. The bone dragon that had absolute magic resistance and could completely nullify magic below the 7th rank, and there were even 2 of them. In his hands, they also couldn't survive a single move. What was this kind of existence if not a monster? At least, it was impossible for there to be such an existence among humans. Kadjit was completely overwhelmed by fear, and he hysterically roared at Noah, How can a human be so strong to this extent? How can he be so strong that even one of the special intelligence units of the Celian theocracy, that a dark scripture, that only those who have reached the hero domain can join, can't fight back? As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the air suddenly changed. Noah slowly tightened his grip. He didn't have the slightest intention of showing mercy as he planned to choke Clementine to death. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Kadjit. You said, one of the special intelligence units of the Celian theocracy. Kadjit, who was stared at by Noah's deep dark eyes, froze there and couldn't speak anymore. Ignoring Kadjit, Noah turned his head again and stared at Clementine. You are one of the special intelligence units of the Celian theocracy. The person from the dark scripture? Clementine couldn't speak at all. She could only kick her legs that were suspended in the air and let out muffled cries. Under this kind of situation, Clementine's breathing gradually became weak, and the strength of her struggling also began to slow down bit by bit. If this continued, it would only take less than 5 seconds for a powerhouse who had reached the limit of a human to be reduced to suffocating to death. At this time, Noah let go of his hand. Clementine, who fell due to gravity, directly fell to the ground. Like a drowning person, she covered her throat and coughed while lying on the ground, gasping for air to absorb the oxygen that her lungs lacked. You. Clementine raised her head with difficulty, her pair of bloodshot eyes stared straight at Noah, her face like a ghost. You bastard, so you still have the strength to curse? Noah looked down at Clementine from above, his face completely cold. Very good, it's good that you can speak. I still have a lot of things to ask you. I hope you still have the strength to speak. Clementine's face twisted. It was because of anger, but also because of fear. Driven by the 2 emotions, Clementine squeezed out a voice with a ferocious expression. What exactly, do you plan to do? What do I plan to do? Noah laughed coldly. There are a lot of things I plan to do, such as answering the question of why the people from the dark scripture came here. But there's plenty of time for that. In short, I hope you can tell me the location of the capital of the Celian theocracy. That will save me the trouble of having Demiyugos investigate. Noah didn't give Clementine a chance to reply. He pinched Clementine's face and curled his lips into an arc that sent chills down her spine. Of course, I don't need you to cooperate. There are plenty of ways to get information from you in Nazarik's underground tomb. Don't you like violence? Now, be prepared to endure all the violence you'll inflict in your life. After saying this, Noah pushed away Clementine's face without showing any mercy. Clementine fell heavily to the ground and let out a pained cry. Ah! On the other side, Kadjit finally collapsed under the attack of fear. Kadjit didn't even want the pearl of death in his hand. He directly threw away the magic tool that he regarded as his life. He scrambled to his feet and staggered in the opposite direction of Noah. Now, Kadjit only had one thought. That was to leave this place as soon as possible. This wish was extinguished. Poochie! A tearing sound resounded. Kadjit's sorry figure and mournful scream simultaneously stopped in the air. Sharp blades pierced through Kadjit's body from all directions. And those sharp blades were the arms of monsters. Chapter 1246. Drip, nearly a dozen sharp blades pierced through Kadjit's thin body. While keeping Kadjit in place, the crimson blood on the tip of the blades dripped to the ground, gradually forming a pool of blood. Kadjit first slowly lowered his head, looking at the sharp blades that pierced through his body one after another, the blades covered in his own blood. He then raised his head with difficulty, looking at his surroundings. It wasn't until this time that Kadjit was able to clearly see what kind of monster had pierced his body with a blade. They were monsters that were about the same size as humans, and looked like black spiders in ninja attire. Since they were monsters that looked like black spiders, then these monsters naturally had 8 legs. As for those 8 legs, they were all sharp blades. In other words, the sharp blades that pierced through Kadjit's body were the legs of these black spider-like monsters. Looking at these monsters, Kadjit slowly opened his mouth. While blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, he spat out words with difficulty. WH. Why? Kadjit's question, if heard by others, might not be able to understand anything. However, everyone present clearly understood what Kadjit's question was. That was, where did these monsters come from, and when did they appear? Undoubtedly, until a second ago, there were no other creatures around except for Noah, Clementine, and Kadjit, right? However, this question was a bit boring. Magic that can make you invisible shouldn't be rare, right? Noah said faintly. Although these monsters don't rely on magic, but a special skill to make them invisible, they have indeed been around since the beginning, and have been guarding this place. If I hadn't appeared, the moment you stepped into the tomb, they would have directly strangled you. This was also the reason why Noah personally appeared here. Previously, Noah had ordered demiurgos to collect information on the Celian cult. But because the cost of maintaining the great necropolis in Nazarek had been solved, Noah asked demiurgos to focus on the development of the great necropolis in Nazarek. Otherwise, he would have gotten the information on the Celian cult long ago. After all, Noah only needed information on the location of the capital of the Celian cult. The location of the capital of a neighboring country, he only needed to go to Elantir and spend some effort to ask, and he would be able to get it easily. The reason why he didn't do that was because the tomb in Nazarek was more important. After knowing that there were intruders, Noah decided to come to the surface personally to see if he could collect any useful information, and not let the monsters guarding the tomb directly strangle the source of information. He didn't expect that this time, he would meet one of the special intelligence units of the Celian cult, and it was a member of the Dark Scripture. It was the most suitable. When you decided to invade this place, was it? Noah looked at Kadjit, stared and closed his eyes. Thus, you can hold on to your regret and die here. Kadjit's eyes widened a little, and then his pupils began to dilate. His head drooped down, and he completely stopped moving. The monsters that pierced through Kadjit's body pulled out their blades one after another, bringing along a burst of red blood. They let Kadjit fall to the ground, and the ground was gradually dyed red. Deal with the corpse. Noah glanced at Kadjit's corpse, and then shifted his gaze to Clementine. Also, bring this woman back. The surrounding monsters immediately bowed their heads respectfully, received the order, and went forward to detain Clementine. Realizing that she had really provoked a powerful opponent, and also understood the cruel fate that she would have to bear next, Clementine hysterically resisted and struggled, but she was completely unable to free herself from the hands of any of the monsters around her. No matter what, Clementine was at most a character who had reached level 35 at most. On the other hand, the monsters on the surface of Nazarik's graveyard were at least level 50. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for Clementine to escape from the hands of the monsters that were detaining her. Thus, under Clementine's sharp screams, this person with a personality defect was escorted by the surrounding monsters into the large ancestral hall in the center of the tomb, and into the large tomb of Nazarik. What awaited this person with a personality defect would be countless times more cruel than the torture that they inflicted on others in their life. This was the only thing that could be ascertained. After Clementine was escorted into the large tomb of Nazarik by the monsters, Noah walked forward and came in front of the pearl of death that Kadjit had thrown on the ground. He bent down and picked it up. At this moment, the pearl of death in Noah's hand flashed with a faint light. Then, Noah heard it. A voice suddenly rang out in his head. "Greetings, great lord of the tomb, I offer you the highest respect." The sudden voice startled Noah. Then, he realized something and looked at the pearl of death in his hand. Looking at the pearl of death that was emitting a faint light in his hand, Noah narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Was it you who spoke just now?" Under Noah's gaze, the voice from just now sounded in Noah's mind again. "Yes, great lord of the tomb, please allow me to introduce myself. I am the pearl of death, an extremely rare item of wisdom in this world, please advise me." Intelligent item? Noah held the pearl tightly in his hand. In other words, although you are a magical item, you have intelligence? That's right. The voice in Noah's mind sounded a little proud. Although I can't say that I am unique, but until now, I have never seen a second item with intelligence like me. Hearing this, Noah was more or less surprised. There were too many magic items in the underground tomb of Nazarik to count. Among them, there were many treasures that were absolutely precious to this world. Some were even treasures that only existed in myths and legends. But even with so many treasures, there was not one that could be like the Pearl of Death, which had its own intelligence. However, in the next second, Noah regained his calm. After all, this was a world where magic prevailed. Using magic, it was not difficult to seal a soul in an item and let the item have intelligence. "Then, what is your purpose in talking to me?" Noah asked with interest. "Don't tell me you want to recognize me as your master or something?" "Yes, great lord of the tomb." The voice in Noah's mind began to carry a tone of respect and flattery. An intelligent tool like this one should naturally be used by the most outstanding person. Your strength has convinced this one, so please accept this one's loyalty and allow this one to work for you, great lord of the graveyard. Hearing this, Noah's heart was filled with disdain. Used by the most outstanding person? Was someone like Kadjit the most outstanding person? Definitely not. However, didn't this Pearl of Death still work for Kadjit? In other words, this so-called intelligent tool was simply a tool that spoke human language to people and ghosts. Originally, Noah was slightly interested in it. But now, Noah's interest in it had fallen to the lowest point. Just as Noah was about to say something, in Noah's mind, an emotionless but pleasing young voice suddenly appeared. "No need." As the voice sounded, the small silver sword on Noah's back emitted a blinding light. "Master, you have me, the holy sword that can kill the Demon King, you don't need me to pick up something from the side of the road." As soon as he finished speaking, the dazzling light emitted from the small silver sword shot towards the Pearl of Death, causing the pitch-black light on the Pearl of Death to tremble and let out a miserable shriek. In the next second, the round pearl in Noah's hand lost its light and the voice from before disappeared without a trace. Noah almost laughed. This Aster, why was he jealous of a pearl? You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.